I can say once again, welcome to everyone. And thank you for joining us with this webinar. We are going to start with Dr. Mustafa Aydin, who is president of EURAS, and also he's president of Istanbul Aydin University. And he's a very experienced educationist, and he has been in the business for many, many years. And most of you know him, of course. And so instead of going in extent to introduce each one of you, I'm just going to go through this one by one. That we have Mustafa Aydin joining us from Istanbul Aydin University, Marco Di Donato from UNIMED. But how we are going to allocate time, we are going to give 8 minutes to each speaker, with the exception of Mustafa Aydin and Marco Di Donato, because Mustafa Aydin is going to say a few words on welcoming remarks and then his intervention. Then Marco Di Donato is going to report on their work, UNIMED work on Libya, the startup work. Then we'll continue with Dr. Ismail from Somaliland, and ex-foreign minister of Somaliland. If His Royal Highness Zolani Mkiva joins us, then we'll continue with him. Professor Sabuhuddin Hadzialic from Bosnia-Herzegovina, and then we'll have other speakers lined up. We have 3 hours of marathon, if you like. And so I'm not going to continue more longer, and I'm going to pass the word to Mustafa Aydin for his remarks and for his intervention.
Okay, thank you very much, Professor Aybar. Thank you again for this organization. Also, thank you very much for every participant from every world, from some country, from the Africa, from the Asia, from the Europe. It is a very important organization, very important meeting, and especially for these days, we need this meeting, this organization, this idea, because there is a lot of work, a lot of problem in our world, in our region, and for this, thank you very much again, Professor Aybar. And but I want to, you from permission, I want to continue my speech after that Turkish language, and I want to my colleague Irem translation. Some microphone open, please close the microphone, because if open any microphone, we cannot see each other. And I want to please all the participation close the microphone. Yes, thank you very much again. And I want to my colleagues Irem Arman. She is my advisor for international relation. I speak Turkish language, and I want to her translation from Turkish language to English language. Öncelikle bütün arkadaşlarımıza, bütün katılımcılarımıza, sayın büyükelçimize ve değerli akademik arkadaşlarıma katılımları için çok teşekkür ediyorum.
First of all, I'd like to thank everyone, especially the ambassador and all the academicians, valuable academicians who are here with us today.
Evet, çok değerli konuşmacılar var aramızda.
We have very valuable speakers here with us today.
Her birinden muhakkak ki konuyla alakalı çok değerli görüşler alacağız.
And obviously, we're going to have some very valuable information from each and every one of them.
Dolayısıyla ben çok özet bir bilgi vererek değerli konuşmacılarımızın daha fazla bilgi vermeleri için onlara fırsat tanımak istiyorum. Ve onlardan istifade etmek istiyoruz. Bu değerli konuşmacıların görüşlerini almak istiyoruz.
We would like to get their opinion on this topic.
Evet, EURAS Avrasya Üniversiteleri Birliği'nin temel kuruluş amacı zaten bu coğrafyadaki hem kültürel, hem sosyal, hem siyasi olaylara elinden geldiğince çözüm üretmek ve bunu paydaşlarıyla birlikte ortaya koymak.
The main purpose of the establishment of Eurasian Union is to find solutions and to find some other solutions and political, social, and cultural issues.
Bu güzel, şu pozisyon güzel İremciğim. Evet, hele de içinde bulunmuş olduğumuz bu korona döneminde bu süreçlerin daha da zorlaştığını hep beraber görüyoruz.
Especially during the time of Corona, we see that this is extremely hard at this point.
Dolayısıyla bu korona sürecinde ise zaten bütün sektörlerde, eğitim sektörü başta olmak üzere çözümler üretmekte ciddi zorluklarla karşılaşıyoruz.
During this Corona time, of course, in every sector, especially in education, we are having difficulties in finding solutions.
Bir de buna çatışma ortamları girince bu çözüm üretme daha da zorlaşmaktadır.
This finding solutions becomes harder in the conflict areas as well.
Özellikle eğitim sektöründe farklı teknolojiler kullanılarak online ve dijital platformlarda sistemi sürdürmeye çalıştı bütün dünya.
Especially in the education sector, our sector is trying to find solutions in digital and online platforms.
Bu barış olan ülkelerde, sükunet ile ülkelerde bunlar yürütülebildi.
It was only possible in the countries that have peace and harmonies.
Peki eğer o ülkede bir problem varsa, terör, iç savaş, bölgesel savaşların içerisindeyse burada diğer sektörlerle ama özellikle de eğitim sektöründe acaba nasıl ilerleme yapıldı? Hiç kimse bunun farkında mı?
I'm wondering if we have any idea how in the places of terror and in wars and other conflicts, how the education find a way to continue.
Öncelikle şunu ben değerli konuşmacılarımızla, değerli katılımcılarımızla paylaşmak istiyorum.
Especially, I would like to share something with all our valuable participants.
Ben hayatımın 45 yılını eğitime vermiş bir insanım.
I dedicated 45 years of my life to education.
Eğitimin dışında da çok fazla bir şey bilmem.
I don't know much about anything else but education too.
Ama eğitimde de fena değilim.
But I am quite good at education.
Dünyanın hemen hemen 5'te 4'ünü dolaşmış, 500'ün üzerinde dünya üniversitesini incelemiş bir insanım.
I'm someone who traveled the 4/5 of the world and just evaluated many universities all around the world.
Hayatımın bir bölümünde Kahire'de askeri ateşelik yaptım.
At some part of my life, I was a military attaché in Cairo, Egypt.
Bu coğrafyayı biraz biliyorum.
I'm quite aware of this area, this geography.
Sudan'ı biliyorum, Kuzey Afrika ülkelerini biliyorum, Orta Afrika'yı biliyorum, Balkanları biliyorum, buralarda görevler yaptım. Kafkasları biliyorum.
I know Sudan, North Africa, Middle Africa, and Caucasus, and many Balkans, and I had some work and there as well.
Hiç böyle lafı evirip çevirmeyeceğim, dümdüz konuşacağım. Düşüncelerimi dümdüz sizlerle paylaşacağım.
I'm not going to twist the words. I'm just going to be very straightforward with you all.
Özellikle Orta Doğu coğrafyasında, bu bölgemizde hiçbir zaman iç karışıklıklar ve savaşlar bitmiyor.
Especially in our region, in the Middle East, the conflicts never ended and it will never will.
Ve savaş sonrasında belirli ülkeler, isim vermek istemiyorum burada, bu savaş yapılan ülkelerde bir takım yatırımlar, bir takım destekler, bir takım sosyoekonomik çalışmalar içerisine giriyorlar.
I'm not going to give any names, but in this conflict area, some countries are doing some post investments and some projects, some works after these conflicts.
Ama hiçbirinde istediği sonuç elde edilemiyor.
But none of them were able to achieve what they planned to achieve.
Ne ekonomik olarak, ne sosyal olarak ve ne diğer alanlarda.
Either economically, socially, or in any different areas.
Ben kendimce bir eğitim hekimi olarak, bir eğitim doktoru olarak şöyle teşhis koydum ve tedavisinin de şöyle olacağına inanıyorum.
As an education doctor, I diagnosed this and I have a prescription for this as well.
Bugün bu düşüncelerimi sizlerle paylaşmak istiyorum.
Today I'm going to share with you the transcripts. Yes.
Çok özet olarak uzatmayacağım.
In very short, very in summary.
Ben şuna inanıyorum.
I believe
temelinde, zemininde eğitim yok ise, eğitim yatırımı yok ise, eğitimin gelişme çalışmaları yok ise sizin yapmış olduğunuz hiçbir desteğin ve yardımın karşılığı olmuyor.
If you don't have the investment on education, the involvement of education in every field, if you don't have it in the foundation, you cannot build anything up to that.
Temeli olmayan bir ev kurmaya benzer bu çalışmalar.
This is like building a house with no foundation under it.
En küçük bir sarsıntıda, en küçük bir depremde, en küçük bir rüzgarda bütün o yaptıklarınız yok oluyorlar.
So in a very small wind, a small earthquake will diminish all the house that you built.
O zaman çatışma esnasında ve çatışma sonrasında eğer biz bu coğrafyada bir faydalı bir çalışma yapmak istiyorsak, faydalı bir girişimde bulunmak istiyorsak, evlerden, binalardan önce, yani ekonomik ve sosyal diğer çalışmalardan önce temeli sağlamlaştırmamız, sağlam temeller atmamız lazım.
So in order to have a stable future for these conflict areas, before economic and social developments, we have to have a good foundation that is built with education.
Dolayısıyla bu temellerin de harcı, bu temellerin de tuğlası sadece eğitimdir.
And this foundation can only be built through education.
Burada da şöyle bir yöntem takip etmemiz lazım. Takdir edersiniz ki birçok ülke bu konuda çalışmalar içerisine giriyorlar. Eğitim geliştirme, eğitimi dünyayla entegre etme, uluslararası ilişkileri güçlendirme yönünde birçok çalışmalar yapılıyor.
As you all know, many countries are developing many different ways of solutions to find the way to develop the education.
Fakat şu gerçeği göz ardı ediyor bu ülkeler.
But these countries are just missing some points.
Veyahut da o dışarıdaki eğitim kurumları.
Or the institutions that are outside of that country.
Çok sıkça kullandığımız bir kelime var. Uluslararası literatürde bunu ekonomik alanda kullanıyorlar, sosyal alanda kullanıyorlar, doğal olarak eğitim ve benzeri alanlarda kullanıyorlar. Yeniden yapılanmak.
There is a very similar. There's a saying that we all use in the international communities, in economy, in social events, and also in education. This is redevelopment.
Ben bu kelimeye, bu sözcüğe şiddetle karşı çıkıyorum.
I'm strongly against this word.
Ne demek yeniden yapılanma?
What do you mean by redeveloping?
Yani o ülkenin geçmişi mi yok, tarihi mi yok, kültürü mü yok, eğitimi mi yok, sosyal yapısı mı yok, mimarisi mi yok? Bu çok tehlikeli. Hatta o ülkeyi aşağılayıcı bir tabir olarak görüyorum ben.
This is, I think, very degrading for that country, considering that they have no history, they have no foundation, they have no beliefs and culture and anything else. So they have to develop everything from the scratch and everything new.
Bütün ülkeler bunu farklı sektörlerde aynı anlayışla yürüdükleri için, anlayışla girişimlerinde yaptıkları için sonuç alamıyorlar.
And many countries, because they are trying to build something new, they are failing at the end.
Bu Irak'ta düzeltiyorum, Irak'ta da böyle oldu. Suriye'de
This
de böyle
happened
oldu.
in Iraq,
Afganistan'da
Syria,
da böyle oluyor.
in Afghanistan,
Farklı Afrika ülkelerinde böyle oluyor.
in several different African countries.
Ve ismini vermek istemediğim birçok ülkede aynı anlayışla Batı dünyası veyahut da o ülkelerde bir takım çalışmalar yapmak isteyen ülkeler bu anlayışla o ülkelere yaklaştıkları için sonuç almakta maalesef istenilen netice elde edemiyorlar.
This Western idea of building something new has been a very troubling situation for these countries, and at the end it all ended with failure.
Yani o ülkelerde biz hangi çalışmaları o ülkeyle beraber yapacak isek, eğitim alanında, sosyal, ekonomik ve diğer alanlarda oranın bugüne kadar beraberinde taşımış olduğu mevcut değerlerin üzerine, mevcut kapasitesinin üzerine bunları bina etmemiz lazım.
Whatever we're gonna build in the specific country, it can be either economic, social, or in education. It has to be built upon the values and beliefs that they already have.
Sizde demokrasi yok, ben size demokrasi getireceğim diye ortaya çıkarsanız oraya batarsınız. O bataklıktan yıllarca da çıkamazsınız.
You will sink
Örnek
into,
olarak.
for example, you will definitely sink in if you go to a country and say that you don't have democracy, we're going to bring you democracy, you will sink there and you won't be able to get out of it there.
Öyle değil midir? Bütün ülkeler bir insan naturasına, bir insan bünyesine benzemezler mi?
Isn't it the fact that all the countries has like a living organism?
A ülkesindeki kişinin kolesterolüyle B ülkesindeki kişinin kolesterolü bile bir değil. Onun naturası, onun yapısı birbirinden farklı.
Even the cholesterol levels of someone in an A country and the B country can be very different because the nature of that country is different.
Ülkeler de böyle.
Countries are like that too.
Her ülkenin kendine özgü bir naturası var, bir doğası var, bir yapısı var.
Every country has its own nature, has its own structure, has its own values.
Allah da insanları öyle yaratmadı mı? Farklı farklı yaratmamış mıdır?
And God also created each and every one of us different, didn't he?
Hepimiz aynı şeyden hoşlanmayabiliriz.
We may not like the same thing.
Hepimiz aynı şeyden üzülmeyebiliriz.
We don't get sad from the same events.
Ülkeler de böyle.
Countries are like that too.
Dolayısıyla biz o ülkelerde bir çalışma yapacaksak o ülkenin naturasını, o ülkesinin birikimini, sosyal alandaki birikimini, tarihini, kültürünü, eğitimini dikkate alarak ve o ülkenin özelliklerini de dikkate alarak orada çalışmalar yapmak zorundayız.
If we're gonna do something in a particular country, we have to look at their history of social, cultural beliefs and values and try to build something upon on all of them.
Bu noktadan hareketle coğrafyamızdaki çatışma halinde terörizmden kaynaklanan, iç karışıklıklardan kaynaklanan, dış karışıklıklardan kaynaklanan ülkelerde insanlık adına, o ülkenin mutluluğu adına bir şey yapmak istiyor isek şu yollar izlenmeli.
So starting from this point, if we want to do, especially in our region, to bring something good for the humanity, these are the things that we have to do.
Bir hekim anlayışıyla önce bir durum tespiti yapılması lazım.
Just like a doctor, we just have to diagnose the event.
Mevcut değerleri tespit etmek lazım.
We have to just focus on what the values and beliefs they have.
Onu bir kenara koyacağız.
We're going to put it aside.
Tabii ben daha ziyade bir eğitimci olduğum için benim bu söylediklerim tamamen eğitime dönük olarak ifade etmek istiyorum.
Of course, as an educator, I'm talking in terms of what we should do in education.
Yani örneğin Libya'nın, örneğin Somali'nin, örneğin Sudan'ın ve benzer diğer ülkelerin eğitim alanındaki mevcut durumu nedir? Bunu tespit ederek bir kenara koymamız lazım. Masanın üzerine koymamız lazım.
For example, in Libya, in Sudan, in Somalia, we have to look at what the education situation is, and we have to put it on the table on the side.
Bu mevcut masanın üzerine koyduğumuz bu değerin dünya ile ihtiyaçlara cevap verebilecek nitelikte olup olmadığını ve neye ihtiyaç olduğunu onun yanına koymamız lazım.
And right next to it, we have to look at what the world needs, what the education sector needs, and we have to put it just next to the what diagnosis.
İkinci aşamada o ülkenin ihtiyaç duyacağı insan kaynaklarını tespit etmemiz lazım.
In the second phase, we have to look for what kind of employment that country needs.
O ülkenin kalkınması için, o ülkenin sosyal refahı için ne tür insan kaynağına ihtiyaç olduğunu tespit etmemiz lazım.
We have to look at what kind of employment that country needs for their social welfare.
Ve o mevcut eğitim sisteminin o ihtiyaç duyulan ihtiyaç kaynağına cevap veremeyeceğini veya verecekse başka nelere ihtiyaç olduğunu tespit ederek o mevcut eğitim sistemini ona göre geliştirmek, ona göre yenilemek, ona göre dünya ile entegrasyonu sağlamak lazım.
So when we look at the employment needs and what the education sector has, we have to look at if it can compensate what the country needs, or if they need any more extra improvements in the education sector in order to compensate the employment needs of the country.
Belki de bunu yaparken o ülkedeki mevcut eğitim kurumlarının, özellikle de üniversitelerin hangi alanda niş alan olarak hangi alanda daha güçlü olabileceklerini tespit ederek o alanda o üniversiteye destek verecek, işbirliği yapacak dünyanın diğer üniversiteleriyle o üniversiteyi entegre etmek lazım. İşbirliğini sağlamak lazım.
Maybe at this point, some universities has to be specialized in some certain areas, And in those areas, they have to get in cooperation with the world universities and get more experience on those fields.
Bir başka deyişle her bir üniversitenin, o ülkedeki her bir üniversitenin alanlarının sınırlayıp belirli olması gerekir.
In other words, every university has to have some underlined areas of interest, and they have to focus on that areas.
Ve o alanda güçlü olan dünyadaki diğer üniversitelerle de entegrasyonu sağlamak gerekir.
And they have to get integrated with the world universities that are working on those areas as well.
Dolayısıyla eğer böyle bir çalışma yapılırsa samimi, içten ve tamamen o ülkenin refahı, huzuru ve farklı alanlardaki kalkınmasını hedef alan ön yargısız ve çıkarsız bir anlayışla yaklaşılması halinde o ülkeye gerçek anlamda bir eğitimci ahlakıyla yardım etmiş oluruz.
So if we work on this as a sincere, honest, noble way to develop that country and to develop the education system of that country, and as education volunteers, we will be able to accomplish what we set out to do.
Ben düşüncelerimi bu şekilde özet olarak aktarmak istedim sizlere.
I just wanted to share with you my feelings, my ideas in a very short terms.
Biliyorum ki çok değerli fikirler bu toplantıdan çıkacaktır.
I know that many valuable opinions is going to come out from this workshop.
Daha sonra bu değerli, bu ortak aklın oluşturmuş olduğu düşünceleri, fikirleri bir araya getirerek inşallah ummanda bir damla misali bu coğrafyamızdaki bu ülkelerimize, tabii ki kendi ülkelerimize de katkı sağlayacağını düşünüyorum.
And after this workshop, all the ideas will come together and will become just like a drop in the ocean to make better our education systems better, especially in our region.
Ben tekrar katılımınızdan dolayı hepinize şükranlarımı sunuyorum.
Once again, I would like to thank you all for being here with us today.
Avrasya Üniversiteleri Başkanı olarak bu çalışmalara verdiği katkıdan dolayı hem Afrika Araştırmalar Merkezi Başkanımız Sedat Bey'e ve diğer bütün katılımcılara tekrar teşekkür ediyorum. Hayırlı toplantılar diliyorum sizlere.
As the president of Eurasian Universities Union, I'd like to thank once again to Professor Aybar and all our valuable speakers for being here with us today and organizing this event.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Çok teşekkürler Sayın Başkan. Thank you very much for your contribution. You have covered an immense area, and you set a very concise agenda for a educational reform in a post-conflict situation. Now I'm going to pass the floor to Marco Di Donato, who stepped in on behalf of UNIMED, replacing Marcello Scali. Thank you very much for doing this, Marco. And before moving on, I'll just pass the floor to you. Please continue with your contribution.
Thank you very much, Professor Aybar. Thank you for the invitation. And thank you also to the President of EURAS, Dr. Mustafa Aydin, for his speech. And that obviously touched many of the points of UNIMED also activities. I have to say this is a meeting of EURAS, but I can see several friends of UNIMED in this regard. We have some universities from Libya, some universities from Italy, and also I can see other universities and participants, and obviously Istanbul Aydin University, which is a valuable member of UNIMED. So thank you all. I'll take 10 minutes of your time for discussing about Libya Restart activity. First of all, the greetings of my president, the greetings of our Secretary General, and obviously my director, and his apologizes for not being here. Unfortunately, for medical reason, he cannot be here, and he does need me to replace him. And I'm PhD in political science. I'm a researcher at UNIMED since 5 years, and I have a wide experience on Arabic and Islamic countries, with particular focus on movements and politics. This is my field for UNIMED. I participated and I coordinated the research on Libya Restart. And let's see if I can share my screen in order to show you some PowerPoint presentation. Should be easy. It is. I think you can see it now, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yes, very well.
So Libya Restart is an analysis of the Libyan higher education, system. I see in the list of participants Dr. Rida Ben Saleh from Zawiya University, and he participated in the research. And we, after 2 years, let's say, of research, we have been able to define a report structured as follows. As a first step, we made an analysis of the Libyan higher education system with facts and figures. We analyzed then the structure of the governance, the quality system, the international dimension of the Libyan higher education system, the cooperation thanks to the European Commission funded projects, and the role of the Libyan universities in the society at large. This point is one of the most interesting one, and I think which is in line with the speech of the President Mustafa Aydin. When it comes to system in crisis, we decided to see how education can play a decisive role in contribute to the through a science diplomacy action for the stabilization of the country. And we realized very soon that despite the crisis in the country, despite the war, despite all the problems that we had in Libya, universities remain a crucial actor in the country, able to guarantee us to be able to discuss with all the society and also to discuss between East, West, and South. On the basis of our data, we analyzed the needs and constraints of the Libyan higher education system through a SWOT analysis, and I will show it in details in a while. And we set up 13 recommendations. I'm going to present it at the end of my speech. We published an executive summary summarizing all the results, and also an infographic per each university participating in the report. What we have done with the report, we have first of all asked Libyan universities to validate report results last June. So we had an online meeting. Unfortunately, due to the coronavirus, we cannot meet either in Tripoli or in Tunis. And we organized this meeting in cooperation with the EU delegation in Libya. An online meeting also with NEO, and we validated all the results and the recommendation we wrote. And then we presented, almost 1 week after the first meeting, all these recommendations, reports, and everything to the public through a dedicated meeting in the framework of the UNIMED Week in Brussels. And the UNIMED Week in Brussels is a yearly event which is similar also to EURAS, where we bring our university to Brussels toward the European Commission. Again, this meeting was, the aim of the meeting was to create concrete partnership actions and initiatives to support the recommendation. So basically, this is the practical translation of our activity with respect to the theory. The methodology on the Libya Restart report, how we did that. The research was divided into quantitative, qualitative, and the final validation step. The first step was the quantitative analysis. We submitted a survey defined by our internal research team to 18 Libyan universities. These 18 Libyan universities were selected as follows: size and relevance of the institution at the national level, geographical distribution, so not only on the coast, but also in the south, such as Sabha, the balance among the partners already involved in EU-funded projects and not involved in EU-funded projects, the size, obviously, of the university, and universities that were already in contact with us. The data we collected in the quantitative phase were then validated in a second qualitative part, where we interviewed the Libyan friends and colleagues, and we had semi-structured interviews in more or less 2-3 months, focused on the national education system, the country system, and the question regarding universities in the society at large, research activities, and affiliated teams and topics. What was very interesting for us was to analyze the Arabic materials we had and we collected, because many of the reports focused on Libya were not taking into account Arabic sources. And in our case, we considered it very extremely relevant to translate and analyze, for example, the law 501 and several articles that are available until now only in Arabic. Finally, before the meeting of June, we sent the draft report to all the Libyan universities by asking for validation and additional comments. And then we were able, after almost 1 year and a half, to have the final report in front of us. I'm sorry if I am a little bit long on the methodological note, but for us it's crucial to demonstrate that this is a shared process. It is not a top-down approach where we made a report without taking into consideration the Libyan perspective. These reports has been made hands in hand with our Libyan colleagues and friends and local stakeholders. And this is the UNIMED approach in almost all our activity. Regarding the SWOT analysis, this is how we define, how we evaluate the system current features, and we developed our recommendation. If we have, for example, take into account the internationalization of the Libyan higher education system, we have to identify the strengths, the weaknesses, the opportunities, and the threats that can refer to this example. One of the most interesting results for us in terms of strengths was that in Libya, we really had an impact from the European programs, and in particular of the Tempus and K Action 2 capacity building. This is for us a very clear result. We cannot say something different than what I'm saying, because for Libya and for Libyans, really the Erasmus Plus Key Action 2 capacity building impacted in a really decisive way. What about the weaknesses? For sure, the weaknesses are related to the scarce financial autonomy of the university, the frequent changes in the leadership. You cannot imagine how many times Libyan universities changed their focal point with respect to UNIMED, with respect to the European funded projects, but also, simply speaking, they changed the international, the IROS, the International Relation Office representatives, almost 3 times in a year, and this is a disaster for the relationship. But despite all the problems, despite the war, despite the electricity cut, despite the low quality of internet, and despite all the problems we may find in the political instability, which is constantly treating our work in Libya, I have to tell you something. This Libya Restart report showed us that universities are not only perceived as a crucial actor in the region, not only they are capable of determining positive changes in the society, but universities are willing to cooperate despite all the problems. Universities are willing, are there and are cooperating, and despite all the problems they may have, they are there and they are ready to support any initiative in the country. And Libyans are really there for cooperation in any field you may think. And we submitted new projects towards Erasmus Plus, and we do hope to have the chance to work on that with our Libyan friends and colleagues. Our recommendations, generally speaking, are focused on the topics you see here: governance and autonomy, quality assurance, international cooperation, and universities in the society at large. As it's written here by my colleagues, recommendations are not written in the stone, never. Recommendations are food for thoughts. We are here to present recommendation, and then we can discuss, develop, revise it, expand it. As long as the discussion is still there and we have the opportunity to discuss with the Libyan friends and colleagues and with European and worldwide international organization that wants to invest and work with us in Libya. So let's start presenting the recommendation. We can present a recommendation also for themes and topics. You have here recommendation for governance and autonomy. One of the most interesting things for us was to see that Libyan universities have they have to go through a benchmarking system, which is very close to what I've heard until now from Mr. Mustafa, Dr. Mustafa Aydin, regarding the need to have specialized universities and not general universities that have everything in their offer, but the need to have specialized university to develop a shared national strategic vision, because Libyan universities sometimes they feel this vision as imposed by their ministry, and in this regard we recommend to increase not only academic autonomy but also financial autonomy. Financial autonomy, increasing financial autonomy, in our view, is not the idea to really cut any kind of bridge between the university and the ministry, but allow the university to manage the budget in a different way, and also to decide on which priority put the budget, and also the capability of the university to hire staff and also to manage the resources in a more proper way. As you can see, university academic autonomy is relatively low, and also the current system for assignment of responsibility position is nomination and not election. But when, for example, when we discussed this recommendation with our Libyan colleagues, they already said we are undergoing a reform process of this governance system, and we would like to have the support of UNINET and also other actors for determine a very strong and deep change of this governance system. The quality assurance, which is another relevant topic, we had 4 recommendations in the framework of the quality assurance system. One of the main recommendations, in my view, is to guarantee that staff members can go through a constant training and updating for increasing their performance in teaching and research, which is not actually foreseen in the Libyan system. In this very moment, also there is a need for review the quality system of Libyan National Center for Quality Assurance. We are already in contact with the head of the National Center for Quality Assurance, Dr. Mohammed Al-Attoub, and we are ready to support them in this regard. And also, one very interesting thing for us, because we are involved in several projects of curricular development, it is time now for Libyans to make the process of accreditation of master and courses more systematic and accountable. All these recommendations have been approved by the Libyan colleagues, and we are already working on that with all of them. International cooperation. I have to tell you that here I'm not focused on all the 3 recommendations, but only on one recommendation, which is the necessity to fund science diplomacy action. Science diplomacy action are crucial in the Libyan scenario. First of all, because despite the crisis, academicians have never stopped to talk to each other and never stopped to cooperate. I always remember when we discussed with the Tripoli University office, and we told them, we don't think, what do you think to involve Benghazi and Tobruk universities? They said, we are ready, because they are our friends, because we cooperate with them despite all the political division we might have. And this shows us how we can count on Libyan universities for obviously not solve all the problems of the country, but at least find proper channels for discussion, for debate, and for reaching also actors that probably someone may think it is not easy to reach, or it is possible to reach. So we already urged the European Union to support in short and medium and long term this kind of activity, to focus on capacity building, to focus on science diplomacy, and also enlarge the number of Libyan universities that are or not involved until now in this cooperation framework and cooperation scheme. In this regard, where to start to cooperate with Libya. If you ask to Libyan universities from where to start, the answer is everywhere, you decide. Because obviously the needs are so many, and there is no this idea of prioritize the cooperation. According to us, to our view, there is a need to start from a very specific point, and you can see from the graph, from the spider chart, the first point from where we have to start and from where we suppose it is necessary to start is health. Not because of the coronavirus, but because of the fragmentation of the Syrian system before the coronavirus. So you can imagine now the situation. Before the coronavirus, there was a clear need to work together on health and health science and to raise the quality of health in the country. What about now with the coronavirus? This need is even more and more clear, and we do hope that in forthcoming months we can work with the Libyan colleagues on the issue on health. But despite the health issue, which is a really urgent issue for the Libyan colleagues, we also think that it is time to raise the quality of research in the country by a very precise capacity building action in the framework of research. Until now, we had all the capacity action focused on teaching. Now it's time to raise the quality of research, because an university is not only teaching oriented, but it's also, and if not, I can say mainly research oriented, because university without research is nothing. I'm not saying that the level of universities in Libya is nothing or is zero. I'm just saying that we can do more together through capacity building action. And I know for sure that Libyan colleagues are ready to work with us for raising the quality of their research and in the specific field of the health, but also, as you can see, management, governance, and basically to skill their staff, improve the management of research and innovation action, and have a national strategy for research. I think for Libya in the forthcoming years, it's time to apply for more Horizon Europe program, for more research and exchange scheme, and move to another level, another step, after having benefited for a long time to Erasmus and capacity building action framework of Erasmus. Last but not least, the science diplomacy action is related to the social relevance of universities in cooperation with local experts and local actors. How to guarantee the employability of graduates. This is part of the third mission of the universities. If we improve research, then we improve relationship between universities, industries, decision makers, and this means we are improving third mission and social responsibility. And again, this is a cycle. Improving research means improving relationship in the society at large and improving the third mission. Higher education institutions are actually serving the community, and the community and communities consider higher education as a crucial part of their daily life. Just to quote one example, I always remember people from Sirt and Al-Jabia used to say us that we only came back to our houses and we only considered the situation in the city stable when academicians went back to their work and when universities reopened again. And this allows us to understand how strong it is the consideration universities have in this scenario, and how Libyans as citizens consider the role of their higher education institution system, which is a very important role. What's next? This is my job also to tell you what we can do together. First of all, the report will be updated at the end of December. We have new data, new statistics, and provided by Libyan friends and colleagues, and we will update it in December 2020, hopefully by having new universities such as Zintan University. Our aim is to upscale Libya Restart methodology in other scenarios, and we are thinking to work in other emergency countries, for example, Syria. We are planning to multiply our events for dialogue for the benefit of Libyan colleagues This will be done in 2021, together during our General Assembly in Jordan and during our UNIMED Week in Brussels. And we do hope that with new projects and new activities and new common ideas, we can increase and diversify the international exposure of Libyan universities. Also by using the expertise of Libyan universities. Can you imagine how relevant is the universities of Libya in the south of Libya, such as Sabha, if we think of all the interest that the European Union can have toward sub-Saharan Africa? And this will be really crucial for them. And we are also trying to increase the cooperation between the International Organization of Migration and Zawiya University for the benefit of introducing courses in migration and management in their university, because we all know how migration situation is delicate and also sensitive and also at the same time crucial in the framework of Libya. Many thanks for your attention. Professor Aybar, I hope I didn't speak too much, and I'm here for any question and any consideration you may have. And thank you very much for your attention.
Thanks a lot, Marco. This is very interesting. It's a very intensive work on a post-conflict situation, particularly in Libya, which is a burning issue these days. And you have done an excellent job producing this report. And I understand you are going to update it in December 2020. Probably you will be circulating some information about it beforehand. So many others might be able to contribute to your report, particularly on our end. Istanbul Aydin University and our research center might have something to say about it. So thank you very much for this very intensive but informative presentation. I'm glad you stepped in. Maybe we should continue with Dr. Ismail. She's going to have a PowerPoint presentation, and once we wrap up everything, Marco, then we might come back and visit if people have quick questions that you probably will be able to answer, so that this will make our use of time more effective. Yes, Dr. Edna, Adan, İsmail, Kıvanç Bey, presentation'ını açabilir misiniz? I'm just checking if she's, yeah, she's there. She is there. Kıvanç Bey, Edna, Adan, çok teşekkürler. Edna, the floor is yours if you are there, and you can do your intervention. Can you hear me?
What about now? Can you hear me now?
Yes, very well. Thank you. Go ahead, Edna. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I don't want to lose more time. I just like to put this on the map so people know where Somaliland is. It's a country between former French Somaliland and former Italian Somalia. Is Somaliland. Somaliland is a country that has emerged from a long civil war, and the priority after the civil war was to get our people back from refugee camps, get the cities that were destroyed during the war rebuilt again. This is a hospital. You see a picture of a hospital. Many health professionals were killed. Many, the educated, the elite, those who could leave, left, those who could not were killed. And by 1991, when the country was peaceful again, the people came back and started to rebuild. This is a hospital. You see a hospital on the map, on the screen. It was a maternity hospital. These were the kind of, the situation. The city was flattened. 250,000 people died. 1 million people in refugee camps. By 1991, when peace returned, there's some people who had fled to other countries returned and started to rebuild. The best contribution I could make when I retired from the UN, and I had a long career with the World Health Organization, was to come back and build a hospital, because this is what I have been doing all my life, working in hospitals, training health professionals. And this is the beginning of the hospital when it was started in 1998. It's being built on a site that used to be a killing ground once. Can you turn the pictures again?
Yep.
So, and this is the construction. It went on to waste time on it. Next picture, please.
Yep.
And in fact, this on the part of the picture, just above the cars that you see there, that is my office, and that is where I am talking to you from.
All right.
The best thing to do is, it's not the equipment, it's not the supplies, it's the knowledge. This is what we concentrated on. And while the hospital was being constructed, we recruited the first 40 nurses to train for the country, because the Ministry of Health kept saying, we need nurses, we need midwives. We only had 17 doctors in the whole country in 1998. And the size of Somaliland is bigger than 18 countries in Africa. It has the same size as England and Wales combined. We have 4 million population and 17 doctors. So the government kept saying, we need nurses, we need doctors. And these are the first group of nurses who are being trained in the hospital department, while the construction is still being completed for the hospital. Next, please. I will go quickly over the pictures, and then I can go over the problems that we're facing today. We started training health workers. We started training lab technicians. We started training we started training midwives to fill the list. We could send somebody who had at least 2 years or 3 years of training. The university came much later. We were just beginning to fill the vacuum when the pandemic, corona pandemic started. We were only prepared to give basic healthcare when suddenly we had to deal with very severe respiratory emergencies with corona and the pandemic. Today, of course, the universities had to be closed. We had to shut everything down, and we had to start teaching our students online. Now, teaching somebody online, if you're teaching literature, if you're teaching social studies, is something, but when you're training health professionals, you need to see them, touch them, explain to them, demonstrate to them. They need to smell, they need to feel, they need to communicate with the person they are treating. And this was a very, very difficult thing to do. The other problem that our teachers had no experience teaching online. E-education was something that was new to us. Our internet is very unstable. And many of the students who we are training come from homes where they have no electricity, where they have no internet. Many of them don't have a smartphone. They don't have a laptop. So teaching online was very unfair to poor students. Only the wealthy ones who had access to internet could get the lessons that we had to provide online. So we had to come up with a solution. We had to find centers that the students could come to and distance themselves and share what we were teaching online with those who had no internet in their homes. We also had to keep our library open for longer hours, because at least in the library we have the laptops, we have the desktops, and we have the 24-hour internet and we have 24-hour electricity. Today, the universities have opened because, thank God, alhamdulillah, the corona pandemic, the number of infectious cases have declined, and university students have returned since the 15th of this month, barely 2 weeks ago. We had to catch up with all the lessons that our students missed. We had to catch up with our semester examinations. There are those who are finishing their research and graduating this year. It really has upset all our plans, but it was a wake-up call, because at least now we are developing a very strong online teaching for every subject, and many of the courses that we teach, although the students are physically coming to the university, are doing a lot of self-teaching, so that if in the event that we have another wave of corona, we will have had more practice. We would have trained our teachers better to teach online. We will make materials available, even if it's on a memory stick, so we can concentrate lessons on a memory stick and give the students that to take home and find a computer somewhere near where they live, so they can follow the video lessons on the memory stick. We're also trying to refurbish them and give them to the poor students so that they can have access, they will have their own laptop. I know it's going to be expensive, but this is the best we can do for our students. Another thing was we're really very grateful for is the people in the diaspora have been teaching lessons, PPE material and supplies. Every time somebody comes, they have been bringing boxes and boxes and boxes of supplies, of masks and gloves for the students to have to protect themselves when they are looking after students. Today, the message that I want to leave with everybody is that, thank God we have survived this wave of the pandemic, but we don't know what is around the corner. We need to prepare for the worst. We need to prepare for emergencies. We need to prepare for if it's earthquake, if it's tsunami, if it's a major disaster, transport disaster, buses and whatever. We need to strengthen our emergency preparedness. We need to strengthen our critical care department, because suddenly with donated respirators, we did not know how to use respirators. We had never used respirators before, except for the single respirator we have in the operating theater that the anesthetist uses when a patient is intubated. So Corona has done a lot of damage, but it has also rung a bell to wake us up, that we should not just think that everything is going to be running smoothly as we planned it. We must be prepared for the unplanned, for the unforeseen, for the emergency, for the critical care that an emergency brings. Today, one of the one of the wonderful things that I feel very grateful for my staff is that when the emergency started, we gave our staff the offer of taking leave if they had leave that was due to them, to take leave. Every single one of them said, no, we will not take any leave, we will not take any holidays until we get the pandemic under control. This is people who are getting $120 salary a month. This is dedication, this is determination, and this is what I expect every health professional to practice in the world, because unless we have that human factor, unless we have that human contribution and determination, we will not be able to overcome any emergency, however big or however small. I am going to re-emphasize the need for learning from each other's experiences. What we can do together is very important. What we can share is very important. And we would welcome, since Somaliland is peaceful and stable, and it's been stable for 20, 30 years, we get a lot of volunteers, and we would like, as soon as Corona permits and the flights reopen, we would like to restart the visits from visiting professors, from visiting researchers, from residents who come from all corners of the world. We would also like to invite retired academicians, because one of our biggest needs today is people with expertise to help us teach our students, people who have experience in teaching, people who can teach skills. Our medical students are in their 4th year. If we don't hold them by the hand, if we don't train them properly from the beginning, they will become unprepared for the real world of medicine. And I always believe, like my father always said, who is known as the father of healthcare in my country, if you cannot do something well, don't do any damage. If we are not properly trained, we will cause damage. Another lesson I learned from him was that if you cannot do something with your heart, with your conscience, with love and passion, you will not do it well. So I wish to emphasize the need for education, the need for sharing experiences. I would like to welcome people who can help us teach, like others have done. I'm looking forward to partnering with other universities, because there is a lot we can also share. Whether it's long-term or short-term, Somaliland is peaceful. If it were not peaceful, I would not be here. What I would like also to do is, Professor Sedat, feel free to use the PowerPoint I sent you. There is no copyright on it. Feel free to use it as you wish. And I welcome and thank you for this opportunity. Maybe I will not take all of my 8 minutes. Somebody with far more information to give may make use of any time I have spared. Thank you all so very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ismail. I have listened to you a few times in the past, and every time I listen to you, I learn something. It's your experience and your knowledge is so extensive. Every time you say something, it's really enlightening. Thank you very much for participating in this, particularly in a capacity building situation, a place like Somaliland, what kind of challenges it faces. In your own experience, and your contribution teaches us a lot. So thanks a lot for this. There are a lot of food for thought in that. So we are going, and thank you very much for allowing us to use your slides. We'll definitely go through it. I have seen them, very interesting, very nice. Now I'm going to invite His Royal Highness Zolani Mkiva, a great friend, a member of parliament in the Republic of South Africa, from the ANC. And he is the poet of Africa. He's the carrier of African cultural heritage. My friends, Your Royal Highness, thank you very much for joining us. And I'm very, very glad to see you online like this. Please take the floor for your intervention. You have to turn your mic on, Zolani.
Thank you very much, Professor Sedat Aybar, and allow me to bring you warm greetings and actually fraternal greetings from the African continent, particularly from South Africa. It gives me a great honor to salute you and also to salute all the friends who are connected in this very important international workshop, which is addressing one of the most important and the critical subjects, which I think the world ought to take into account and begin to mainstream. Greetings to all of you. Allow me, Prof, to speak from my heart on this matter that we are addressing. This is a matter which is very close to my heart, my good professor, because I want to premise my talk by saying, upon the education of the youth and the children of this world, upon the future of this world depends. It is very critical for us as we draw the roadmap into a solid future to begin to know that what we need to do as humanity is to invest on human development. Human development should be the central feature of what we work for, of what we put our resources into, of what we put our time into, of what we put our energy into. Because education is an instrument of social transformation. If we use education, we can deal with so many ills. I would say that if we invest on the education of our people, half of our problems are done as human beings on earth. So it is critical. And I want to give you the background of where we come from in Africa, just to give people who may not have a sense of what is so deep about what I'm talking about. In Africa, we have got more than 1.3 billion people. We live in a continent which is very, very rural in terms of the majority of its landscape. What it means is that our inhabitants are living in the margins of society, where you cannot take for granted the issue of connectivity. We are told that we live in an age of the fifth industrial revolution, but those masses of the people that I'm referring to remain disconnected from the connectivity of the net. What does it mean for the young people who are in those rural areas? Some of them have never seen a television. Some of them have never seen a telephony. Some of them have never connected on the Wi-Fi because there is no wavelengths, there is no connectivity. Now, given the outbreak, think about it. Think about the current situation that we face as the world, where there is an outbreak of the coronavirus and people are told to stay at home and children can no longer go to school normally because there's a new normal. Then it means that they cannot be able to exploit the online study because there's no connectivity. They can't do. They don't have electricity. So I am saying then, this then means that we as the people of the world, we need to embark on the solidarity of a strategic nature. There is no country that is an island in this world. There are no human beings that must live as though they are the only ones that live on the surface of earth. It is important that we join hands and actually, it is important that we join hands and ensure that we embrace each other for the common good of humanity. There is no way that you can say you are enjoying freedom whilst the majority of the people are so disenfranchised and disadvantaged. So I'm saying that from where we speak as Africans, but not only African people, because there are many people who are found in squalor. There are many people who are found in limbo, in many areas of the world, in many communities of the world. We must not turn a blind eye. We must not look away. Education means that we must work together and ensure that everybody has a right to access education, not just education, but quality education. We need a population in the world that has got a systematic mindset. We need to systematize the minds of the people of the world so that they can work for the good of humanity. Education is not just any kind of education. We must talk and get into the detail and say, what kind of a syllabus does the world require? We need relevant syllabus. We need relevant education for our people, which is not outdated. Education that must go with times. Education that must take into account the current challenges of the world, so that that education can help us as humanity to shape a future where we can eliminate many social ills that are confronting us. We face the issues of drugs abuse. Our young people are abusing drugs. It is a lack of education that makes them to do that. If you give them irrelevant and outdated education, then you are forcing them to go and look for things that they think they are exciting. You need to excite them in a classroom by bringing much needed creativity, by bringing new ideas and allowing them to give thoughts, by allowing them space and time to choose what they want to be taught. It cannot be that the teachers alone must decide what must be fed to the children, because we live in a different age where children, they get matured actually when they are 12, 13, 14, and 15. So you must give a space and time also for that to occur. It is very critical that I emphasize the point of solidarity, because it is one of the major stumbling blocks to the development of the world. We can't work in silos. We need to eliminate artificial borders in terms of human interaction. We must ensure that also we defeat things like racism, tribalism, and xenophobia. We must see ourselves in a united spirit, wherein we emphasize the oneness amongst us, that we are one human race and we are related not only culturally, but we are also related in terms of history and experience. And it is also important that we draw lessons from each other, so that the mistakes that are carried elsewhere in the world cannot be repeated elsewhere in the world. It is important, therefore, that we compare notes, we share thoughts, we share views, and even exchange those views. One of the things that I want to encourage in this international symposium is that we must begin to look as academics, as intelligentsia. We must look very seriously on an issue of the exchange program. We must get to know each other. Let's ensure that the young people in Turkey are given an opportunity to travel into Africa, to come and acquaint themselves with how Africans live, to come and understudy the indigenous knowledge systems of Africa, and vice versa. We must have a situation where we send thousands of our young people to China to go and understudy the Chinese culture, so that when we do that, we can begin to lift the winning formulas from the respective societies. Then we take them back to our own societies, we infuse them, we capitalize on the good things that are a winning formula from where we have seen. We cannot be dogmatic. You can't take your culture as is and think that it is the best thing on earth. But you need to use your culture in your given space as a framework of your style of living or your design of living. But you must then draw lessons elsewhere in the world in order to strengthen and enrich your culture, because culture and education goes together. They are the two sides of the same coin. Hence, I am putting it to you that culturally, we may not be very much acquainted to each other. And we're not, when we are not acquainted to each other culturally, it also poses a challenge wherein if I have to do a business with you, you have a difficulty because we have a misunderstanding right there, because we don't understand each other's cultures. It is important that we do that. Also, the language that is spoken in the world is very key and critical. The world is composed of diverse communities. And this diversity, we need to make it the beauty and the spectra of the world. We must not use diversity as a point of division. Diversity must not make us to be divided. Instead, we must see strength in diversity, because languages are rich and pregnant with culture and vice versa. So therefore, we must not kill languages and assume that there must only be one language in the world. It is important that we can identify 2 or 3 languages and say these ones, we are foregrounding them for strategic purposes. But it doesn't mean that we must undermine and sideline other languages, because if we do so, we will kill heritage and heritages of many, many societies on earth. And those heritages, we cannot afford to do away with them, because there's a lot of wisdom that is entailed in them. It is important, therefore, that we look also into the issue of investing in heritage, because I'm not talking about heritage as the past, but I'm also talking about heritage as the present and heritage as the future. You know what I'm saying? So I'm saying that, and we need to look in heritage in broad terms. We must look into natural heritage. We must look into cultural heritage. We must look into all these kinds of heritages and see what is the relationship between the two, how humanity should relate to nature. We must not demonize nature. We must know that nature is there for us and we are part of it. We must not seclude ourselves from nature. And even our culture, which is our own product as thinkers, as human beings, it needs to move on with times. Culture is dynamic. We cannot afford, I mean, I'm an African and I'm a strong believer in culture, but I'm saying that coming from Africa, there are traditions that we need to deal with them and do away with them, because they are not helping us. And therefore those traditions must be looked at and they must be lifted, and then we must deal with them and we must delegitimize them, because some of them are discriminatory against women, for instance. Women can never be treated as second-class citizens of the world. We must all agree that women are equal to all other human beings as men. So those matters we need to do. However, we must appreciate that from time to time, there has to be a division of labor, given the physique, given the masculinity, and so on and so forth. Doesn't mean that we must plunge people into a crisis, but it means that from a point of view of thinking and thinking patterns, these are the things that we ought to do. As I conclude my talk, because you have not indicated how much time you have allocated to me, I just want to say, I will paraphrase it this way. If you want prosperity for a short term, you grow maize. If you want prosperity for a medium term, you grow trees. But if you want prosperity for a lifelong term, you grow people. And I think if we embrace that spirit, that at the center of humanity is human development, and therefore human investment must be the key driver of the things that we do. And all other forms of investments, like financial investments, we must do and use them in order to consolidate and give you antidotes, which are very educational and which are packaged. As you know, as South Africa, we come from a very, very terrible past where we have a crime against humanity in the form of the apartheid regime governing our country. But the manner in which we resolved that issue should be a very good example for the world, because we have a negotiated settlement wherein the conflicting parties agreed to sit on the table, a revolutionary versus the oppressor. They agree that we need to find closure and we must map a way forward. So South Africa is a very good example where we can import the case study of South Africa and begin to resolve matters of conflict elsewhere in the world. We can't afford in this day and age, my good professor, to allow conflict to continue more than a week as if there's no leadership in the world. Leadership must rise to the occasion. Leadership must ensure that they are visible and they make it a point that it is their responsibility to intervene where there's conflict. It can't be allowed that conflict continue to kill even one person anywhere in the world. We need to intervene immediately. That's leadership and that's education. For me, Prof, I think allow me to sign off with those words. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you so much, Your Royal Highness. It's full of information, and of course, South African experience with education and capacity building has been exemplary in the world, particularly after the ANC took power. after the period of apartheid, that crime against humanity that you have mentioned. And no doubt people benefit from the experience of South Africa, how to resolve those post-conflict situations and how to capacity build after that. And South Africa is proven. But as well as South Africa, there is one more example from Africa, that is Rwanda. And we are going to listen to an experienced educationalist from Rwanda later on. But thank you so much for putting forward the case. Now we are moving away from the continent of Africa. We are coming to the continent of Europe, to Bosnia-Herzegovina. Our good friend, Professor Sabuhuddin Hadzialic is there, and he is sending you, Your Highness, greetings. And Sabuhuddin is going to do his intervention. That's also a very interesting experience with post-conflict capacity building. Yes, can we have Sabuhuddin, Professor Sabuhuddin
Yes, I'm
Hadzialic?
here. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you very much.
Excellent.
But let's put up your
Yes.
PP, and we'll thank His Royal Highness Zolani Mkiva. Kıvanç Bey, can you put up Sabuhuddin Hadzialic's presentation, please? Thank you. Now we are doing screen sharing. Please, Sabi, go ahead.
Thank you. First of all, greetings to everybody. I'm currently on vacation at Croatian coast, so I'm improvised, but because I promised Sedat that I will be part of this conference, and I'm very glad and honored to be here with you today. As you see, the title of my presentation is Media Literacy, the real interactive way of being ethical within post-conflict non-catastrophic society in Bosnia and Herzegovina.
Sabi, sorry. Can you put this on a slide presentation form, please? Because Sabi is going to. Sorry about this, Sabi, to interrupt you there.
Oh, I can see he put slide.
Yes. Okay. Go ahead. Sorry.
So, who is responsible for the media's current state of affairs? Is there any greater freedom of expression today, or is it greater repression, or is it two sides of the same coin? The so-called libertarian society has come to the place of the desired healthy society, and thus we appear to have moral anarchy. Above all, there is the interest of big capital in politics. Technological unpreparedness and non-compliance with ethical and professional standards prevail and overcome all. There is also a problem of overproduction of too many young people in the media field who possess poor skills, the result of the lack of a good education and monitoring of contemporary trends in journalism, as well as too many media outlets for such a small place such as Bosnia and Herzegovina. Everything written about this country relates as well to Serbia, Montenegro, Croatia, Macedonia, and Kosovo. Please continue with this showing the slides. It is not questionable that there is a freedom of speech, but it is application of is mostly abusive and or inadequate. The abuse of the freedom of speech leads to everyone being able to say anything about anyone and anything without suffer almost any consequences or sanctions. Media owners, journalists, and editors are not difficult to pay for slander, punishment, and let's say similarly when they have met the goal, to smear someone, spin real problems, etc. BIH, Libertarian Society, if you can call it like that, should be seen in the context of a non-free, captive, and imprisoned society. Society that is changed to poverty, existential fear, subject to an epidemic of ignorance coupled with the absence of elemental curiosity. Please continue with the presentation. Freedom of speech and poverty. Freedom of journalistic speech and expression in such a society is primarily limited by the employer's interests and the fact that journalism, as it is currently being sought in the labor market, appears to argue that anybody can be a journalist. This is happening while the authors of the commentaries and important columns within the newspapers with highest circulation as the most respected form of writing in journalism are often under the legal age and lack experience, both professional and in real life. This is unacceptable from the perspective of a professional ethical standards, if such a thing does indeed exist. Often in the newsrooms, the sentence is heard, whoever does not like it, then he or she can go, as I can find a new person for 100 euros per month on the street. And what is even worse, that's the truth. People under the pressure of poverty and unemployment are willing to work not only for 100 euros, but for free, just to get involved in the profession, and there is no positive selection of staff as more microphone holders are required than quality and engaging journalists. With their willingness to look under each stone, such journalists often even annoy employers as boring and even dangerous people who can make problems with advertisers, patrons, political and business friends. Here's a banal example of what I'm writing about. When is the last time that you have seen an article or commentary that examines the work of telecom operator? The media are almost totally subordinated to political elites and national interests, which is why they have lost their freedom. Let's take the example in the Federation of Bosnia and Herzegovina. That's part of the Bosnia, entity of Bosnia and Herzegovina, where we can immediately talk about who is currently in power, the left and or right options within one nation, by the chosen topics of public service TV. While in the Republika Srpska, another entity of BiH, we have two equally powerful TV companies, one public TV service RTRS and the other private TV channel BNTV, belonging to different political options. Next one, please. Has there ever happened a case that an option that is under the control, another one, please, of any one of the media mentioned above, is this media asking that option for this or that? Unfortunately not. And that is why professional ethical standards of journalism are in question, where everyone thinks the same, no one thinks the God knows what. Said the great Duško Radović, former Yugoslav writer and journalist who died in 1984, in the 80s in the last century. It is believed that the above-mentioned penury has contributed to the years after the war. As you know, war was between 1992 and 1994. In Bosnia and Herzegovina, international donors donated millions, I repeat, millions of euros. And because of that, it was easier for journalists to write and speak, as they were not dependent on anyone in the country. The beginning of the 21st, please next slide, century brought a rapid reduction in these donations. In fact, today, it is possible to speak about very small amounts in relation to those immediately after the war. Because of this, the media have been subjected, when seeking funding sources, to look to other side, given that BiH is more and more dependent on political interests as a result of the public and private sector of the economy largely financing the media, so the media have become politically dependent. The very fact that the strongest tycoons are, depending on the economic territorial area they cover, in direct connections with political actors, has led to the interaction of the organized alignment of indirect pressures on the media that leads to blackout or underestimation, since the circulation of an inappropriate media to reasonable measure cannot harm wider interests. So, money makes journalists go round. Next slide. Since the money is mostly in the hands of parties and companies associated with them, it is very difficult for the media to survive if they do not have someone behind them. Much of the media, especially, next slide please, in the Republika Srpska BiH entity, are funded from the state budget. Can they criticize the government that finances them? A lot of issues are addressed by professional ethical standards in these areas, which are under the umbrella, the next please, precisely designating subjects of political pluralism in the context of the development of a healthy society. A recently released World Press Freedom Index claims that BiH is in the 58th place, and after which many media said that the media freedom in BiH has stagnated. Namely, in 2006, BiH was ranked 19th, in 2010 at 47th place, out of 180 countries included within the ranking. Now I'm quoting what they said. The polarized political climate, marked by constant verbal attacks and nationalist rhetoric, has created a hostile environment for press freedom editorial policies reflecting ethnic division and hate speech are even more evident. Journalists are attacked for their ethnic origins as well as what they write. Defamation suits by politicians often serve to intimidate journalists and deter them from pursuing their work. End of quote. I'm convinced that instead of stagnation, it would have been better to say that the situation in the media has changed and that the pressures have now been embedded into the system. And by that, they are less visible, recognizable, and far worse in the long run. While the situation is no better in other countries in the region, in BiH, this influence is more pronounced because of the economic and social situation, including a deep national division between ethnic groups, Bosniaks, Muslims, Croats, and Serbs. Specifically, try to be a journalist of the daily Avaz, namely Avaz, and publish something against Fahrudin Radončić, or a journalist of daily Nezavisne novine and criticize Milorad Dodik, or even a journalist of the daily Oslobođenje and write something against the owner of Oslobođenje, Mujo Selimović. It's simply impossible. First of all, because of self-censorship, because journalists are aware that something like this would not pass the editor desk, and such as they don't even try. But even if they did try, such a text would not be published. And we aren't even to speaking about the consequences for the journalists. And there are still a number of such examples. Next slide, please. On the one hand, this can be understood in the context of the fear of journalists and that more and more of them left out of jobs. But for the professional journalism, it is disaster. Those who are willing to sell their human and professional dignity to even a small one salary or a free ride with or a smile of politicians should not be doing this job. By doing such, they are doing a disservice not only to him or her, but also to the ethics of journalism. There are legal frameworks in BiH that provide and disturb working atmosphere for journalists, and that is a largely good basis for respect for media freedom, but these do not apply in practice. However, in addition to legal regulations, physical attacks on journalists, teams, court bans, police clashes in the newsroom, denial of accreditation for certain journalists, and verbal attacks are just a part of what journalists in BiH are suffering. Since 2006, 65 physical assaults on journalists and direct threats to death have been reported, and only 50% of criminal offenses against journalists have been faced with final judgments. It is true that Bosnia and Herzegovina has a pretty good legislation that would be envied by journalists who are fighting against the hardcore restrictions and free information in many countries around the world. It is far away, however, to say that in BiH we are satisfied. The growing political pressures on the media, the information, half information, and of course fake news that journalists receive, pressures from media owners toward journalists, have influenced that all of these laws are almost not being applied. Why this exists? Simply because of a lack of media literacy education, development of critical thinking, and blame on other side, always for any mistake within your ethnic group. War ended in 1995, but as the time is passing by, it looks like it stopped yesterday and will continue tomorrow. Again, why? Because it is much easier to educate a public to hate other and different ones instead of developing education which will develop critical thinking of own problems, which eo ipso will help to overcome exactly these problems. But politicians from all three involved mentioned sides knows and support each other so well in that how to teach their flock herd. By the way, all three sides speak the same language and say that they speak different languages. Why is that? Because the known linguist confirms that we can say that if the differences between languages are less than 40%, people speak the same languages, and that here the differences are less than 15%. Example, Bosniaks, Serbs, and Croats does not need interpreter when talk to each other. Also, to quote famous German philosopher Fichte, nation equal language. So they need to separate languages to be able to call themselves with different national names. At the same time, being non-cathartic shows that all three sides call their war criminal heroes still. Of course, international tribunal legitimately established by United Nations have prosecuted that majority of the war crimes has been committed by the Serbs, then by the Croats, and then by the Bosniaks. Also, who killed even one innocent person during the war is a war criminal, and not to talk about even genocide, such has happened in Srebrenica in 1995, Bosnian city of Eastern Bosnia and Herzegovina, when more than 8,000 Bosniaks has been killed within a couple of days by the side of Serbian forces. Journalists on all three sides, with just few but brave examples on all three sides, serve the fascistic chauvinists, about which I already wrote in Eurasia Review Online Journal from USA back January 2020. Populistic leaders of Bosniaks, Serbs, and Croats within Bosnia and Herzegovina. That said, there are legal frameworks in BiH that provide an undisturbed working atmosphere for journalists, and that is largely a good basis for respect for media freedom, but these do not apply in practice. There is no adequate control of the application of these laws. The best way to properly control these laws would be establishment of an independent parliamentary commission that would monitor the implementation of these laws every 6 months. In addition to violent behavior towards the media, journalists are denied access to information. Also, we have, as I said earlier, the laws on freedom of access to information at all levels of Dayton back in 1995, made in Bosnia and Herzegovina. Many of the businesses of the governing structure are hidden from the eyes of the public and completely unavailable to journalists, which shows a high degree of corruption in Bosnia and Herzegovina. And the laws and how to avoid it. The law on freedom of access to information stipulates that the deadline for the provision of information is 15 days, and misdemeanor sanctions are prescribed if the institution or other legal entity does not provide information within that deadline. But there have been no effects of that provision so far. No one, I repeat, no one has been sanctioned due to denial of information to journalists up to date. Journalists are today the target of many forces, from political to economic potentates. But the truth is that media owners are now employing a staff who meets house rules, and if he or she is not necessarily a good journalist. Responsible journalism, next one, and media freedom can be protected. However, the job and work of journalists in BiH is heavily burdened by low wages and pressures from commercial advertisers. And because of these poor working conditions, journalists go down to lethargy and live in fear of their own existence. The freedom of media journalists must defend with responsible journalism with high professional ethical standards, but with an unanimous appearance. None of the journalists can do anything alone, but together they can do a lot. Journalists are often faced with various types of pressure, and the duty of all journalists is to be with their colleagues and support them when needed. Journalism can be rescued by raising professional standards, and education outside of standards institution is essential. Scholarship programs such as Bern and Reuters Media Center workshops and independent learning, as well as studying at universities that have no influence on this or that policy, whether it is social, economic, and or political. Responsible journalism starts, next slide, with each of individual journalists, because of the first, journalist is responsible to himself, herself, to the people around him, and then to all who may read what he or she writes, and then to profession itself. There is a lacking, first and foremost, of collegiality in the territory of Bosnia and Herzegovina, no matter about which kind of media we are talking about. For example, politicians have a meeting and allow journalists to wait for 5-6 hours in the winter cold, refuse to appear at scheduled time. Why do not all journalists simply agree to leave the site and not report on the meeting? Yes, someone will probably stay and break the deal, but believe me, the politicians will do the same when such things happen on several occasions. There needs to be in the media not a collegial grouping or just one of two, but an understanding that all must be involved. For many, it's a funny when, for example, Milorad Dodik, Serbian member of Bosnian presidency, jokes or offends one of their colleagues, or they are silent about it. Journalists are still squatting for hours in all possible weather conditions, waiting for an unpardonable and often a meeting, lunch, or some of other political event. How many journalists are still working in the black economy, working full time, often more than 10 hours a day, earns just a small amount of money. Media bosses have been employing journalists for many years on fake contracts, giving them a miserable salary. At least a third of them have not had internships, and they are not paid for health and other benefits. Of course, auto-censorship exists in the worst possible form. A large number of journalists are waiting for the job. So this means that there are the same number of people who think twice before editing something within the line of words. So last but not least, 5 criteria: becoming and being ethical. Next slide. We can conclude that there are numerous reasons, next one, for disturbing the dignity of the journalist profession, and for some they are solely responsible, the journalist, and for others there is a government that is accustomed to keeping the media curb. Unfortunately, some practices that violate media rights have become permanent and are not likely to change until there is a fundamental change in society as a whole. Who mentioned media literacy? However, even journalists are just humans. They are two people as well. Like other citizens of Bosnia and Herzegovina, suffer from extreme poverty and existential fear. Because of this, they often work under rules and conditions that are counter to positive media and are silent about what bothers them. To avoid all of the above and to create the prerequisites for the creation of professional ethical standards aimed at the creation of a healthy society, it is necessary to respect and implement 5 basic criteria that are the core part of every ethical system, including those belonging to professional journalists. First of all, the ethical system must have common values relating to honesty, democracy, truth, objectivity, and privacy. This is because before we can come to ethical judgment, society must reach an agreement about standards of moral behavior. Second, criterion is that these standards must be established and based on reason and experience, and they should harmonize the rights and interests of people with their obligations to other people. Third, the ethical system must seek for justice. There must not be double standards of behavior unless there are compelling immorality and morally viable grounds for discrimination. 4, the ethical system should be, as the 4th criterion, based on a freedom of choice and an ethics system that includes responsibility to encourage honest behavior. If that is not done, then we get moral anarchy. And 5, finally, my firm stance is that I always use my own sentence in work and behavior. However many rights I win, I must win the same amount of responsibility. And of course, how we can still, next slide, we still better shape and not allow the continuance and maintenance of moral anarchy. Next one. Should we focus on the law of ethics? The question is quality is unavoidable. What is important is that if a particular profession wants to call itself professional, it has to do its job on an ethical basis with what is most important. Those who accomplish it must be responsible for their work and acts. So, until we meet this, rights equal responsibility, responsibility equal empathy, and empathy equal equality, we will not be able to talk about any of mentioned goals above in Bosnia and Herzegovina, but also wider. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Sabi. This is, you have, as a busy bee you are, I see you are reading from something you have written. I'm sure you are going to share this with us because you have covered very deep issues. And for instance, Dr. Ismail was mentioning about healthcare, and His Royal Highness Zolani Mkiva was mentioning something else that, you know, and yours with media and journalism, how the broader setup for education, the post-conflict capacity building, the role it plays is extremely, extremely important. You brought in a very important dimension that many people misses out, and I'm sure it's received with great interest. Thank you so much. Please do share what you have written with us, and
I will send you the PDF, and you can share it.
So we can provide you with feedback.
Okay.
Now, thank you so much. Now I'm going to call in.
I will do that right now.
Please, thank you.
Okay.
I'm going to call in my colleague, Professor Dr. Titumir Rashed from Dhaka University. He's also running an NGO. a very respectable NGO in Bangladesh. Now we are moving away from Europe to Asia, and Titumir is going to give us a introductory remarks on post-conflict capacity building. He's a renowned professor. Thank you very much for taking part in this, Professor Titumir. And we are looking forward to receiving your intervention. Please take 8 to 10 minutes to do your points, and then we'll continue from there on. Thank you. Titumir,
thank you, Professor Aybar. Thank you for inviting me. And I also thank the Aydin University for organizing an intervention of that importance. And it's good to be with a galaxy of people who are extremely important in terms of their contribution. So allow me to express my gratitude and to be with you. I didn't prepare anything, so I thought I would be really tossing what my heart says and how my mind really shapes. So I would be expecting to speak, which might be sometimes disconnected, disjointed, but let me see how the heart really makes the breeze with my mind. So the first point that we would be really making clear that the old normal was not something desirable, nor is the new normal. Because old normal was something of that sort where we have seen the inequality, the conflict, the pejorative behavior, the prejudice, the division, you name it, you can continue to it. And then obviously we have seen the ideas that we know something, and so there are known knowns and there are known unknowns, then there are unknown unknowns. So what I am trying to be saying, what is known known? And how do we really shape that known knowns? So there is a slogan in terms of building back better, but what is the better? And how are we going to shape that? So I would be making a presentation of a 7-point agenda to begin with, and I look forward to your intervention on those points. So how do we really define universities? And it's good to be in a process where there are Mediterranean Union of Universities and there are Euro-Asian University Union. And I would try to point what I understand and what would shape, because I assume that the known would be, there would be a change in everything, the way we shape ourselves, the way we organize ourselves in terms of society, politics, and the world. So assuming that, I would be trying to make my 7-point agenda. The first one, universities are known to be a place where it generates knowledge. In other words, innovations. So what kind of innovation that we really want to be? Or do we want to be recipient of innovation, or do we want to lead that process of innovation? So that's the first question that we have to ask ourselves, that should we be really building capacity or generating capacity? So how do we create an ensemble where we really lead by innovations? And we have done it. If we really stress ourselves and look at that history, we have been leading in terms of our capacity, in terms of generating knowledge. Why should we be remaining as a recipient of knowledge? So we have to make and break ourselves with that past and really be in the world where we generate knowledge and we lead through knowledge. So that's the first thing that so we have to make a transition from recipient of knowledge to a generator of knowledge. So that's the first step I would be saying. Second aspect, universities are known for really making histories, generating citizenship. So throughout the history, that what we have seen, that university really lead the national struggles, national liberation processes, national political processes. So how do we really bring that citizenship, which is now a kind of a breakdown, censored citizenship with conformities? So what kind of citizenship that we want to achieve out of these processes? So citizenship is a key. So what kind of citizenship? So are we really looking forward to a transformative citizenship? So how do we really build this solidarity to establish transformative citizenship? So that's the second agenda we need to really talk about. Third, definitely, we need to talk about skills. But is that the skill where we really remain reduced ourselves to as a factory, as a workshop, where the return on skill is catapulted in a way, centralized in certain quarters, certain areas, certain countries? So how do we really build our skills, which really ensures that return on skill is with us? We do not make, like Bangladesh being a cutting and maker of ready-made garment industry. We need to have highest value addition that really remains within ourselves. So how do we really change ourselves in terms of skill building? So that's the third area that we need to talk about. The fourth area, what kind of multilateralism are we really talking about? Is it that punctured multilateralism where it is already held hostage by certain countries, certain coteries, certain blocks? Or are we really talking about let 100 flowers bloom? So what is the multilateralism are we really talking about? And what is the alignment? What is the configuration are we really talking about? Are we be swayed by certain taboos, or are we really making a path-breaking multilateralism where there is a shared future for everyone, shared vision? Are we really going to realize our shared vision, shared future, common interest? So how do we do it? So we need to really, and university is the epicenter of creating that sense of multilateralism. So what kind of multilateralism are we talking about? Are we talking about a multilateralism which is driven by certain coteries, certain interests, and with certain leadership that are held hostage by certain groups? So how do we really shape that multilateralism which is not being run by prejudices? So that's the fourth aspect we need to really talk about. Then the fifth area that we need to really talk about, what kind of international public good are we really talking about? So what, in this age of vaccine, we do not hear about, we hear about certain countries really making their stockpiling. So are we really talking about an international public good which is for everyone? So be it, we know, and COVID has shown us, COVID-19 has shown us that how disastrous the world before us and how the disastrous world we are now in, where disenfranchised, how this society is biased. So there are differentiated impacts, differentiated outcomes. So how do we really come up with international public good provisioning system which really ensures not a few but many? So what is our idea in terms of international public goods? That's the fifth area we need to really talk ourselves. Then the sixth one, which is very important, how do we really try to understand this society? And where is this society? Because the neoliberalism heralded that there is nothing called government, nothing called society, only thing is that market. So how are we really trying to understand, and what is its shapes? So market society to public society. We have to really talk about a public society where we need to really move from this market, commoditized, financialized so to a public society, because public society. And finally, given the 8 minutes, I want to complete it within 8 minutes. Do we need to really talk about what is our self? What is our understanding about self? So are we really trying to cultivate that individualistic self, which is driven by self-interest, which is driven by, or are we really talking about human sociality, a society that is driven by human sociality? So a society which is driven by solidarity. So if we are not really if universities are the epicenter of vanguards, and if we can't really shape, then we are sterile. So we have to really talk about, so this is in short my 7-point agenda, where university can really talk about how do we talk about innovation, citizenship, then, and in terms of skills, in terms of multilateralism, in terms of public goods, in terms of public society, and in terms of human sociality. So I look forward to your intervention on a 7-point agenda that I have shared with a luminary of people who are really thought leader, who are really advancing the ideas to shape the world. We have to really move towards our posterity and ask ourselves and really come up with solutions for the humanity of a common good. Thank you, Dr. Sedat Aybar, for inviting me to these people and share my thoughts. Thank you so much.
Professor Titumir, thank you very much for this intervention. Right to the point, you said you haven't prepared anything, but you have covered a lot of ground. Thank you so much. One thing that you have mentioned that I made note of all of these, but in the beginning, our EURAS president, Dr. Aydin, in his presentation, he was talking about the cultural background, the historical background of a society. You know, with your effort to how to define a society, that you bring in this new concept. And I think it's extremely important that complements what Dr. Aydin was saying, that market society to public society. If societies are defined in terms of marketplaces, then you can probably develop one policy fit for all. But if you are thinking of a public society, then that public society will have flesh and bones that is coming from its historical roots, its cultural roots, and different roots. And in that sense, it would be difficult to have one size fitting for all kind of policies. So that's your mention of this actually synthesizes in my mind what Dr. Aydin was talking about, and how to handle that in a contemporary situation with the IMF and the World Bank, coming up with, now less so, but coming up with one size fit for all policies. That is a challenging idea, which is extremely important in my view. I'm going to look for Liz Nganga, if she is there, because she sent me a WhatsApp message saying that she's having difficulty in coming in to the webinar. If she isn't there, and I don't think she is.
I'm here.
Oh, wonderful. Oh, hi. Wonderful, Liz. Excellent. So thank you for joining us from Kenya. I know she's a very talented researcher, and she's got very important work done in Africa. She's holding a PhD from Sweden. Please correct me if I'm wrong, Liz. So I'm going to pass the floor on to Liz for her intervention, and we continue from there on. Okay, Liz, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you so much, Sedat, for having me. And as Sedat said, my postgraduate research is from the UK, not Sweden. But yeah, it's okay. And I looked at the idea of talent nurturing, which is what Sedat has asked me to talk about. And at the moment, I work for a number of organizations, among them ICIPE, which is the International Center of Insect Physiology and Ecology, the only research organization, I think, in Africa and maybe in the world that works on insect science for development. And so I will speak about talent nurturing. But before I start, I want to problematize the whole idea of talent, because it's a word that is used very often, but there's always an elephant in the room around it. What exactly is talent? So there is this general idea that talent is about academic excellence, academic giftedness. And I think that is a wrong way to look at talent, because then it creates an entire range of exclusion to people who are not academically gifted, who are then perceived not to be talented. So the idea that talent is about being outstanding, having excellent performance, the psychometric definitions around it, the focus on academic excellence is itself, I believe, the wrong place to start. I think what we should instead look at is the notion that every individual has some innate abilities in them that, if recognized, if nurtured, and if we invest energy into them, we can develop these abilities into functions for better performance and for input into development. We can nurture them into capabilities that are outstanding, and that is what we should be looking at. People's abilities, their needs, their interests, and their motivations. Having said that, then how do we recognize talent? To respond to this question, I want to present 4 initiatives that I'm associated with. The first one is something called the African Regional Postgraduate Program in Insect Science, or APES in short. This is a continent-wide program launched in 1983 by ICIPE that I said I work for. And it is aimed at building capacity, building a critical mass in insect science researchers. The way that APES works is that it's a collaborative initiative between ICIPE, which is headquartered in Nairobi, and universities across Africa, and donor funders, donor supporters. So students are registered at any African university that is a member of APES, and then they get their theoretical training, and then for the practical training, they come to ICIPE, where they get the research training, access to world-class equipment in insect science. And then they return to their home countries, where then they are able to propagate capacity in insect science development. Now, APES, as I said, was founded in 1983, which means it's about, 37 or so years, almost 40 years old. And within that time, it has trained close to 800 entomologists, that is insect scientists. And we did a tracer study, and what we found out is that most people who are insect scientists in Africa have been trained through this program. That is one point. The second point is that most of these people, in an age where many African scientists tend to leave their home countries and go to work abroad, they return to their own countries in Africa, and they continue to practice and are now holding very senior positions. And third is the fact that most of these scientists have been able to diversify. They use insect science as a platform to then build research capacity, training capacity, and to nurture institutions that are then standing on their own and becoming incubators of other researchers. And one of the most beautiful things is the way APES has been able to bring in even scientists from countries that do not have the right infrastructure, and to equip them with the skills where they can go back to their home countries to be able to nurture from scratch institutions of research. So the second initiative I would want to talk about is rather new in comparison to APES. It is called the Regional Scholarship Innovation Fund. This is a fund that was started by African governments, and its aim is to capitalize on the current environment in Africa. We've all heard about Africa Rising, but alongside that is the understanding that Africa will only achieve inclusive and sustainable development if, on one hand, we are able to nurture young people, to nurture their talents, and on the other hand, if we are able to build enough technical and scientific capacity so that we're able to integrate transformative technologies into our operations to be able to add value to our raw products instead of, for example, instead of exporting them raw. So we need to enhance our technical and scientific capacity. So, and then the second goal of RSIF, which is the acronym, is to be able to translate scientific knowledge to complete the path from scientific knowledge to scientific innovation. So in other words, what RSIF is trying to do is to build a virtuous circle of increasing PhD graduates while improving higher education, strengthening faculty, and then feeding into innovations. So as I said, talent is contentious, and where I suppose RSIF differs from many other is the recruitment process. We put out 2 calls so far, and of those calls, we've received about 1,000 applicants. Now, we can assume that most of these are well-qualified, outstanding young people. So to filter them down to 50 is a process. And the process that we are using is to not only look at academic excellence, but to also look at other indicators like critical and creative thinking, their leadership skills, and to also give young people from countries that are coming from conflict or from marginalization of any sort, to give them an edge by tailoring our training process to include, for example, to include remedial courses, to include ways to address challenges for students who have families. So we are coming from a very holistic point of view that goes beyond your traditional PhD scholarship process. Just looking at young people as a package from where they're coming from, what are their motivations and what are their goals. Now, I'd also want to speak about a third initiative I'm affiliated to, which is called NEM Africa. And the message here is how you can use a problem, a challenge that exists to build capacity. So NEM Africa stands for Nematology in Africa. So those who are probably working in the scientific area will know that nematology is a science of looking at microscopic worms that affect either people, crops, and so on. So this is a neglected area of study. And very recently, we've started working in this area. And through partnerships with the private sector, the public sector, partners in Africa, partners in Europe, we've been able to create a hub where we're nurturing, where almost anybody who has motivation and interest in nematology can come and get a feeling, a basic understanding what that area is about. And then if they show any potential, then they can be moved on to, let's say, masters or to PhD. So we're not starting them at PhD level, we're starting them at internship level. They could just have come straight from high school or from bachelor's. And at the moment, as we speak, NEM Africa in just 5 years has become one of the largest hubs of training in hematology in sub-Saharan Africa. So this is really just to show the different strategies and how you can even the ground, so that as many people who are talented or who are interested or who are motivated can get access into training and have their talent nurtured. And this format has also been used by yet a fourth initiative that has been fortunate enough to work on, which is called the Consortium for National Health Research, which was funded by IDLC. And the idea here was to resolve challenges in terms of creating capacity in healthcare. And again, we use the same format where you'd get people who had come straight from bachelor's degrees, but who were able to express to us at the interview point of entry that they had the right motivation. And most of those, through a 6-month internships, they were able to then proceed from that to masters, and many of them have now gone on to postgraduate level. So the key points I would want to draw from these experiences that I've had working for these various initiatives is that talent is not always academic performance. Second, that there are very many young and talented people with abilities and people with motivation in Africa, and they just need a foot in. And third is the idea of partnerships. Regional initiatives are very important because the capacities are not even, but there are all these hubs of excellence across Africa that can nurture continent-wide talent and then diffuse it, devolve it to different countries that don't have that kind of capacity themselves. And fourth is a need to create a credible hubs that can then serve as platforms for donors and other investors to put in their resources and then support capacity from them. That is the end of my presentation, Ahmed, and I'll be very happy to share these examples later on.
Great, thanks a lot, Liz. That has been a very, very important intervention, because every time we talk and think about education, we think about primary, secondary, tertiary education, but not necessarily on talent and talent management, which is probably not necessarily very much interlinked with education per se, as you have mentioned. But you're drawing attention to this, particularly in a post-conflict situation, is extremely important, Liz. Thanks a lot. And probably we have to come back to you for your expertise in this area in the near future. So I want to thank you for this intervention. If you have something written, because I have the sense that you're looking at notes, if you please share those with us. Particularly this talent management is a new thing, and we need to look into it more closely. Now, Sabu, shall we finish this, because we are under time pressure, and then you can make interventions. But now let's listen to Aydin Nurhan. Dr. Nurhan is a retired ambassador, moving back from Africa, now back to Asia, where Titumir is. And Dr. Nurhan has extensive experience in post-conflict areas. He was an ambassador in Ghana. His experience in Africa is also extensive. And he was an ambassador in Afghanistan for 3 years, representing OIC. So his observations and his work is extremely, extremely important. He's got academic input to his knowledge, but also practitioner input. And I'm very happy to have Dr. Nurhan here. And I'm going to leave the floor to Dr. Nurhan for his intervention. Thank you. Thank you for being patient and waiting for us. Now, floor is yours.
Thank you, Professor Aybar. Is my voice coming all right?
Okay. Yes, perfect. Yes, perfect.
Okay. Now, I'll start with Afghanistan, but go into the general concept of education in the world, including Turkey. First, I would like to start with Atatürk. He made a great revolution in Turkey on education, everything. And Emmanuel Khan and Shah Pahlavi, Afghanistan and Iran, they wanted to imitate Atatürk. And Atatürk said, you cannot do it. Because the country I am with and the country you are with are different countries. That was the start. Now Atatürk, one of the best things he did, and honestly, I used to criticize Atatürk for being too tough on religious madrasas until I went to Afghanistan. When I saw the madrasas, and I was, of course, monitoring Pakistan, madrasas in Pakistan, and the government cannot do much about them. It is nearly impossible to manage those schools, whereas in Turkey we saw it is different. Still yet, Taliban is preparing to take power. Afghanistan, since the last 20 years, is so changed that the new generation will not let it do whatever it wants. Still yet, again, the global education is secular. Afghanistan, Taliban wants religious education. So, after the conflict, what would happen? Now here comes Professor Aydin's, His Royal Highness Mkiva's words on culture, and Professor Titumir's words on multilateralism. You cannot neglect the specific culture of any country. What to do? You have to find a medium way between secular education and religious education. This is a very tough thing. Afghanistan should be able to do it, and we have to help it do it. This is the first thing I want to talk about. And also, just in parentheses, as I was leaving Kabul, I told my colleague, the American ambassador, I said to him, look at Iran. The ladies don't even cover their heads anymore. They're driving cabs, etc., etc. They're in social roles. If you let Taliban alone, it would have matured in 20 years from radicalization like Iran. It was not let do that. The Afghans were not let try that. I think that is another important issue of the international community trying to democratize other countries. Now, coming to the aim of education. Like in many other countries, aim of education in Turkey, starting with the Ottoman Empire, was to create a nation. Number two, later in the Republic, and number two, starting with the Ottomans again, later in the Republic, creating bureaucrats for the state. Literacy was only 5%. We're talking about end of 19th century, 5% literacy. You could not find educated people to be bureaucrats. And then the last phase, of course, is human resources for the private sector. We are at that stage, but even to surpass that soon. That was the aim of education. Now, philosophy of education. Remember Europe, Reform, Renaissance, Industrial Revolution. Europe was in Dark Ages, Middle Ages, when Christianity took over the Roman Empire. Europe went into sleep, living for the next world. With these three revolutions, Reform, Renaissance, and Industrial Revolution, Europeans woke up to the materialist tastes of this world, like the Greco-Romans before them. Now, the pendulum, call it the pendulum, was in one extreme of spiritual. With these three revolutions, went to the other extreme of materialism. And Turkey followed them. And the world followed them. The kid in Turkey goes to the primary school. As a human being, he is based on two legs, the spiritual leg and the material leg. The teacher of the secular education starts chopping the spiritual leg. The higher the kid is educated, the more materialist he becomes. The secular education then creates secular-based atheist or agnostic people in the end. In many countries, we see this trend, especially in Northern Europe and Britain. So now, if the university is different than the rural people, the peasant, if the university takes the kid away from its culture, and then the country is backward, the politician is trapped in between. What does that mean? University wants money from the politicians, and the politicians say, you have to keep with my society. So there is a discrepancy in between. Then the university says, I cannot sacrifice from autonomy. Now that's autonomy. Mr. Di Donato said autonomy. So this is an important issue, especially developing countries. This is a problem of modernity. The discrepancy between the tradition and modernist, internationalist aspect, multilateral aspect, as Mr. Titumir said. So this is, again, the philosophical approach. Now I will go into the technical part of education. Now, when I was in high school, we're talking about 60s, I used to take 17 lessons a year. I think it's still the same. I don't know, most probably. Now, it's such an ambitious policy. What can you teach a 15-year-old kid with 17 subjects? Just memorize and forget. The best example in Turkey is English language. They take it for so many years, but nobody can speak English if they didn't take other courses. But normal schools in Turkey are very bad in English in Turkey. So 17 subjects is not realistic. And it's not realistic for any country. What to do? I gave a report to the Turkish Education Ministry, and they took it into consideration, but partly. I said to them, like in ancient Greece, sports, especially obesity of the tablet or telephone, especially at this age, sports is a must for our children. This is the first lesson you have to put into the class. Number 2, music. Music is mathematics. It disciplines the soul. Number 3, mathematics. And the last 2 are special ones. Language, mother language, language of the country, and history of the country. These 5 subjects are compulsory. The rest, nothing. Every single day, teach these 5 subjects until the kid graduates from high school. Don't teach anything else. Now, if the kid wants, we are speaking about 2 keywords. One is the interest. 2, ability. 2 keywords. If the kid has interest and ability in another field, the government can put up to 50 lessons if they want, even 100 lessons if they want, if they've got trillions of dollars, and appoint teachers for each subject. If the kid wants any other lesson in the afternoon, it is free. Religion is important. France, one of the most radical laicist countries in the world, which Turkey copied, and Tunis also, solved this problem with Catholic schools. Families send their kids to Catholic schools. So if you want religion lessons, to balance the material, because if you don't give religious lessons, where they end? Psychiatrist or yoga lessons? Because the human beings do need spirituality. Anyway, so this is the technical part of it. Only 5 lessons, and this is much better, especially for Africa and other developing regions of the world. Now going into the technical point now, the material part of it. This is the last part. Now, teacher quality, very, very important. In Turkey, it's in shambles. It's so sad. They have problem even with pronunciation of Turkish words. The kid learns something from his or her educated parents, goes to school, and the teacher, very low quality, says something opposite, and the kid comes back home and says, Dad, Mom, you're wrong. My teacher said so. How to solve it? Very simple, but it has the handicap for the countries that don't have the technology. So the whole world, we should all help all the needy countries in this matter. How? Let's say sports lessons, easiest one. It's so technical. You don't have to put anything national into it. You take the whole technology from the best ever professor or education specialist to make a video lesson of it. These are already on YouTube anyway. but we want the best government projects. Sport is easy. Take it from anywhere on earth. This is lesson number 1. Lesson number 2, mathematics. Again, international. Nothing especially national about it. Again, you can find the best brains of the world to give the easiest lessons to the kids in Africa or Asia or anywhere. Number 2. Music is semi-national. So you can get the help of international experts, best brains, but you also have to put your own input, especially thinking of classical Ottoman music. A foreigner wouldn't know it, of course. And the Turkish lesson or your other mother tongues, etc. Again, national, you have to do it yourself. History, national, you have to prepare it yourself. 5 subjects, where does the teacher go then? Yes, teachers will be called instructors. They'll have their own booklets, manuals. So after 20 minutes of lesson, the kids will be interactive, the teachers will clarify, and there will be open discussion. So in the end, what do we have? A kid who is curious, who is a perfectionist, like a Swiss watch. Something he learns, she learns, they learn the best. For 12 years, they repeat the same things. They become perfect in what they learn. And then in what they produce, they become the best. Professor Titumir said, not the consumers of knowledge, but radiators of knowledge. Thus, we can create them. That was so special. Thank you, Dr. Titumir. And that's about it. I wonder if I passed my time. I apologize. Thank you very much, dear friends.
Thank you. Thank you very much for this short, concise, right to the point, practical. Listening to you, I started thinking, when you come to think of nitty-gritty of these things, it becomes much more complicated. Probably we can later on ask Marco Di Donato what you have said about religion and how it interplays with the education system and what they have done in UNIMET with regards to Libya report. But before we do that, I think we have another very important speaker from Ministry of Education in Rwanda. Habimana, Emmanuel, Habimana, are you here, Emmanuel? There you are.
Yeah, I'm here.
Thank you very much for joining us with this webinar. Now we are moving back to Africa, the continent of Africa, and joining us from Kigali, Habimana, Emmanuel Habimana. Thank you very much. He's very much in the practical world of education. So there are a lot we can learn about, from him. Before we joined you, His Royal Highness Zolani Mkiva was talking about South African experience. And then I mentioned that there is another successful experience with post-conflict capacity building, and that is Rwanda. Now we are all set to listen to you, Emmanuel Habimana. Please, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you, Aybar. My name is Habimana Emmanuel. I work for the Ministry of Education in Rwanda. I'm gonna talk about the evolution of education after the genocide against Tutsi in 1994. Historically, the colonial system introduced the school in Rwanda, and this school was conducted by missionaries. Its objective was to evangelize and to train the administrators of colonial power. Education in Rwanda was thus characterized by mistrust of traditional values, knowledge, and the literature which conveyed the division of the people was extensively distributed. Within independence in 1962, a ministry with responsibility for education was established, and the first law securing the general regulations of education was introduced. The system was marked by adjustment and reform in 1979 and 1981, which did not achieve the intended goals. Rather than correcting the errors of colonial era, education remained very discriminatory and was not relevant to Rwandan society, culture, and value, which resulted in the people losing their patriotism. This was one of the contributing factors to the genocide against Tutsi in 1994. After the 1994 genocide, the education sector in Rwanda, as well as other sectors of national life, passed through an emergency situation during which the main objective was to reshape and try to restart the education system which had broken down. Since the RPF Nkotanyi stopped the genocide against Tutsi and established the government of national unity 26 years ago, the Rwanda put an end to a century-long discriminatory education. It achieved universal basic education and education for all as a prerequisite for sustainable quality education. The reality is that an educated citizenry has a critical thinking that can sustain itself, and out of the quantity can emerge the sustainable quality. In this regard, the competence-based curriculum was developed and introduced to address the issue of classic curricula, which created unemployed and unemployable graduates. The Rwanda government realized that raising the level of education attainment is crucial for the economic prosperity. The Rwanda has achieved remarkable growth in terms of education and capacity building since the genocide against Tutsi in 1994. The statistics show that in 1995, Rwanda had 1,045 primary schools with 1 million students and 80,394 teachers. But in 2019, there were 2,961 primary schools with 2.5 million students with 878 teachers. In 1994, Rwanda had 228 secondary schools with 55,000 students and 1,800 teachers. But in 2019, there were 1,783 secondary schools with 732,000 students and 23,585 teachers. Regarding the higher education, in 1995, Rwanda had 1 university with 3,948 students and 160 lecturers. In 2019, there were 40 universities and higher learning institutions with 86,206 students with 4,322 lecturers. Thanks to good leadership of the government of Rwanda and the unit of Rwanda people after the genocide, international universities such as Carnegie Mellon University, the American University, African Leadership University, and African Institute for Mathematical Sciences have established their branches in Rwanda for the purpose of education and capacity building. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Emmanuel. It must have been such an important experience and such a challenging thing after one of the worst human tragedies in human history, the genocide against the Tutsi in Rwanda, to build capacity and particularly managing educational system. That has been a very important experience. Now we are remaining in the same continent. We'll come back to Rwanda in a minute again, but first we go to Kenya, and from Nairobi, Mr. Cholosi is joining us. And he is also one of those practitioners with hands-on experience with education, particularly in agricultural area, which is a very important, very challenging areas as far as education is concerned. Mr. Cholosi, are you there? I think I can see you.
Yes, I am. Thank you.
Now, you have a presentation. I'm going to ask our assistants to put your presentation on screen share. Now it's coming up. Yes, the floor is yours, Mr. Chesoli. Thank you very much for joining in and sharing your experience and sharing your knowledge with us on this webinar. The floor is yours. Please go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Professor, for the honor, and I've really enjoyed the presentations, and thank you very much for the opportunity. So I'll be very brief. Our focus is building health and wealth by addressing different components. If you can just go to the next slide, please. So I will not talk a lot about the organization, but basically our focus is to build wealth and health, but we feel that there are contributors to that. Governance devolution, how governance happens, people being at the center of it, involves the wealth and the health of people, the environment, and above all, education plays a big role in contributing to the prosperity of the people. We can go to the next slide. So as we move on that, I think I will not share this you can read, but that's my experience. I will collaborate with Moi University and University of Eldoret in matters health and agriculture and water management, and especially addressing several other issues on rebuilding livelihoods. We can move to the next slide. I want to look at this and focus that catalysts for conflict and the impact of conflict, because when you look at this, they contribute to the kind of education that you need to focus on. And what are the drivers that lead to conflict? And of course, inequality in resource distribution, where people feel being left out of the national cake and usually pushed by the political discourse. Inequality in prosperity and wealth distribution usually are the underlying push to conflicts. Hunger and food insecurity. And if we just reasoned past, in the early 2000s, the bread revolution that happened in the Northern Africa. You remember the Tunisia, and of course the Arab Spring, because of hikes in prices. This contributes to conflict, marginalization, and aspects of discrimination. And that would lead to maybe all-out war, like civil war, uprisings, riots, or discontent, and poverty. And I want to say that widespread poverty puts people in a perpetual state of conflict. And aspects of marginalization, discrimination, where people feel that we are not part of the national discourse. And right now, the new challenge of conflict is the pandemics. And COVID-19 today is worse than any non-conflict. And our work has revolved around people ravaged by HIV and other chronic diseases. And so there's a lot of aspects of reconstituting and rebuilding their lives. We can move to the next slide, thank you. And as we look at that, in conflict, there's a lot of disruptions of societal systems and population displacement, usually leading to challenges in food insecurity and malnutrition. And productive systems are destroyed. And usually the first culprit is usually the agriculture, because people can no longer lead productive lives. And this leads to shortage of food and hike in food prices, and therefore becomes a contributor to the cycle of conflict, which again can regenerate more into more conflicts and other forms of conflict. Movement of goods and services is disrupted, usually affecting the aspects of access to inputs, expertise, and several others in agriculture production. Drivers of economy are usually affected. And when we look at that, we're looking at the hard infrastructure, things that will lead to building or the roads and things like that, buildings like we have seen before, things that get destroyed. However, the soft skills infrastructure in terms of education is big affected majorly. And usually you'll find that there will be flight of skills and talents from a particular area. And the most important effect of conflict is that there's break of trust, which is an important glue to societal cohesion. And when trust is broken, then a lot of social fabric is actually destroyed. We can move to the next slide. So as we look at this, so how the post-conflict education, therefore, must focus on reconstituting essential skills that were either displaced, disrupted, or lost during the conflict. And looking at this, post-conflict education should focus on 3 areas: short-term, meaning trying to look at immediate ceasefire, trying to have resettlement and conflict resolution, getting people back to their normal lives, usually on their farms, resettlement. In the midterm, looking at making sure that the systems are working again, or creating, for example, markets for farmers. Farmers can produce and sell their product. And then in the long term, is about building skills for sustainable development, and then working to eliminate causes of conflict. And this means that building technical skills that would more increase productivity. And some of these that I would like to talk about is we need skills. Education should focus on building skills on advocacy and negotiation that can hold state actors, usually governments, accountable for their actions, so that we ensure that political stability, protection of rights, and restoration of law and order is in place. We need to focus on finance management skills, giving people power to manage their own wealth in terms of managing capital, especially reconstruction capital that comes because of trying to rebuild, and usually treated as emergency and relief, but people need the skills on how to use this. And I like what one presenter said, that it should not be left to outsiders to build the local. The local should really build their own, and they need these necessary skills on how to do that. And then of course we need to do technical skills in terms of production, and it can be in agriculture and in every other areas. And then we focus on settled and resettled populations. And then the other bit is to look at organizational skills, rebuilding social capital amidst severed trust. And of course, how do we run, again, develop organization in the reordering of new normal of doing business. We can move to our last slide. So as we do that, the focus then on post-conflict training should focus on these things as I talk about components of food security. How do we make food available? Skills to increase production, efficient systems of production, making sure there are access to inputs, applications. How do we manage post-harvest management because infrastructure is broken? The second aspect is we need to educate on making sure the food is accessible. How do we create infrastructure for effective supply chain, making markets work and supportive so that people can engage freely? And then food utilization, ensuring end use utility by ensuring that value addition to consumer taste, preference, and health status so that people are able to do. And of course, addressing the effects of malnutrition because that comes as a result of displaced populations in addressing nutrition. So in looking at this, then education should focus on really rebuilding the agriculture skills that is usually oftentimes mostly like in rural Africa, that is usually the driver of economic production. And to me, that would be my few thoughts on that, and just say, I really appreciate this. And we really say that if we focused on necessary skills applicable to making people lead productive lives that can reconstitute, especially in this era of COVID-19, how do we rebuild again? How do people get back and become productive? I believe that would be helpful. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for this prompt presentation, Mr. Chesoli. Probably within the agricultural sector education, one of the challenges is using new talent with 5G technologies, robotics, and other digitalization is coming into agriculture. Basically, educating talented people, particularly in Sub-Saharan Africa, proves to be very important. As Liz Nganga, your compatriot, was talking about the talent management, it can spill over to agricultural area as well, using those more sophisticated agricultural technologies. Now we have, and thank you very much, this opens up a whole new area of research. Actually, each one of these topics are, with what Sabuhuddin is talking about, the journalism, Adan, Edna Adan is talking about, Dr. Ismail, healthcare, the health system, and all the rest of it. Each one of these are like research areas. Now, finally, we have His Excellency Williams Nkurunziza, a great friend, a great mind with well-endowed academic background and well prepared for all the time. He's a senior diplomat from Rwanda, and he's based in Ankara, and I thank him for joining us. He had to go to another meeting in between, and he came back and rejoined us to this webinar. You are there, Your Excellency. It was wonderful to see you. And your compatriot from Kigali, thank you very much for introducing him. Emmanuel, he did an excellent talk. Now, you are the last speaker of today's webinar. Please do your intervention. I'm eager to hear what you have to say for post-conflict capacity building and education. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Professor. Thank you so much. I wish to salute every one of you who is participating in this event. I salute you all with my deepest respect. And I wish specifically to thank Aydin University for shining light on this very important issue of capacity building within a post-conflict setting. Now, I am not going to share a result of an academic research. I am going to share a narrative of a life lived. I'll share our experience in Rwanda with regard to capacity building, the whole concept of education in a post-genocide society. And I want to thank my colleague Emmanuel for having shared with you the statistics about the transformation that we have, that reflects the level of transformation that has happened in Rwanda within the education space between 1994 and today over the last 26 years. Now, what I would like to focus on for me in sharing this experience, it is the place of leadership and national visioning in the reconstruction of a broken education system that inevitably happens within a post-conflict situation. Emmanuel touched on the Rwandan experience. All of you know that in 1994, Rwanda as a country, as a society, literally ceased to exist. By July, Rwanda had become the world's basket case. Nobody knew the country would ever rise again. But 26 years later, Rwanda has become a model state in education, not only in governance, but also in economic management and in education, the whole management of the social space, including education. And the question is, how was this possible? In our experience, we attribute this significant transformation to effective leadership. In a post-conflict environment, you need a leadership that puts people, their empowerment and aspirations at the center of the process of governance. And that is imperative more during a post-conflict environment, even though it is a necessary condition even during peace times. The development of a people must be the essence of the whole process of governance, whether it is during peacetime or during post-conflict times. But it becomes a lot more imperative during periods that follow the end of conflict. And that good leadership allows the evolution of a visioning process that allows the crafting of a roadmap for a people-driven development, a development agenda that allows people the space to grow, the space to find themselves, the space to find their talents and to harness them, the opportunity for kids to go to school, whether they go and learn music or learn mathematics or learn something else, that is neither here nor there, the opportunity to be able to do that. In the absence of a proper political will and proper visioning that sets a roadmap for a people-driven development agenda, historical experience has shown that societies stagnate. In the absence of a proper vision, societies stagnate. Education dies, and the people's capacity to reach their potential fails because there is no space that allows people to breathe. Now, Emmanuel told you about education in 1994 and education in 2019. But I would like to take you back, give you a statistic that he did not share with you. In 1962, he told you Rwanda had one university. And we had that one university until 1994. Over a period of 32 years, the country of Rwanda produced a total of only 3,000 graduates. A period of 32 years. How do you develop a country of nearly 8 million people when you're producing roughly 100 graduates every year? It's very difficult to do that. Okay? But that is what happened. But post 1994, when he tells you we rose from one university to 40 universities and higher institutions of learning, our university student population rose from 3,940 to over 80,000. And we produce over 20,000 graduates every year. That is because of a deliberate choice that the government made, that education is important, society is about people, and people empowered means it is a society empowered. Now, between 1962 and 1994 in Rwanda, education was regarded as a privilege, not a right. It was a gift that politicians gave to their political followers, a small group of party faithfuls, not as an instrument of national development. After 1994, as a matter of policy, education, the main vehicle that builds capacity in society, was placed purely on the basis of merit. Kids went to school because they were able to. And government interventions in terms of scholarships was based on merit. About 2014, I was in UK. I used to be High Commissioner to UK, and I would like to share a very brief story of an experience I had. The government sent on government scholarship 40 Rwandan students to the University of Birmingham to study engineering across different areas, but mainly focusing on mining, because we are trying to develop our mining industry, and we needed people because no mining engineers had ever been trained during the period before 1994. And when I went to meet these young people, I had a chat with them. I wanted to know who they were and where, how they got where, they were in the University of Birmingham, and what they were planning to study and what their vision of the future was. I wanted them to share their story. I wanted to understand who they were. And one young man told us a story that has stuck with me, that really defined what Rwanda has become post-1994. This young man told us that he got a telephone call from the Ministry of Education in Kigali to his village, to his father through a neighbor, because his father didn't have a phone, to tell him that his son needed to come to Kigali, to the Ministry of Education, because there was a scholarship for him to go to study in London. Now, at the time he got this telephone call, his father and his mother had never been to our capital city, Kigali. They had not. The young man himself had never been to Kigali. They did not have any political connections. They did not know anybody in the Ministry of Education in Kigali. He was picked on the basis of excellence in his secondary school examination results. And he was saying how he is the epitome of the new Rwanda, where merit is given to all, irrespective of who your father is, or which village you come from, or which person you know. That is how you transform a society during a post-conflict, environment. Normally, conflict based on disparity in dispensation of opportunity, and you create and that the transformation that Emmanuel was talking about from quality and access to education is a product of what I'm calling that good political will, excellent political will, and the national development agenda.
Mainly what I think we have the point, you made the point that political will and political processes.
Prof, can you hear me?
Now we can hear you. Now, when you come back, we'll continue, and you can do your final remarks. Before we close up, and before His Excellency Williams Nkurunziza comes back, let me ask if there is one final word you wish to say. If you raise your hand, then I can see if anyone who wants to contribute, because we are running out of time very quickly. Okay, may I ask Dr. Mustafa Aydin to say final words? Now, we have set this for 5 o'clock. If
Prof, can you hear me?
yes, we can hear you. Can you do like your final word?
Yeah, I can hear you, except that you can't see me because my video has been disabled.
Okay.
I wanted to say two things very quickly. One is we were able to transform our education sector like much of the rest of the country because we set our vision under what we call Vision 2020. And under Vision 2020, our interest was to transform Rwanda into a knowledge-based service economy. Professor, can you hear me? Professor,
yes, we can hear you loud and clear. Please
good,
wrap
thank
up,
you.
Your Excellency.
Okay. Thank you. And to transform Rwanda into a knowledge-based service economy, our interest was then focused on education, particularly putting significant investments in building education infrastructure, in building human capital, in the curriculum development, especially with the focus on STEM, on building enduring sector-friendly partnerships with development partners and our diaspora around the world, as well as the adoption of ICT as an enabling environment for the scaling up and democratization of education access and quality. We built a fiber optic cable across the whole country, over 7,000 kilometers, to take fiber to almost every school. We started the one laptop per child programs. As Emmanuel said, we are building centers of excellence to first, to mainstream educational excellence in our education system. And the successor to Vision 2020, which is Vision 2050, under its pillars on social and economic transformation places a lot of emphasis on education and to drive Rwanda into a future in which the digital economy will be king. Today, in COVID management in Rwanda, we see robots managing COVID management processes, including talking to patients. We see the use of technology, particularly drones, in delivering blood. We see apps that are being developed by young people for driving cars and so on. So essentially what I'm saying is the vision of where our education system, the direction that our education system is taking is a product of the leadership that has focused on the tooling of our people to be relevant now and in future economies. And I think those two components, good leadership and proper vision around the empowerment of people, is a very critical areas of study within the education space, especially in post-conflict environment. Professor, I know we need to wind up. I thank you so much for the opportunity to speak. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you very much for your intervention. It has been I said in the beginning that this is going to be a marathon, and it was a marathon, particularly for me. And but we have to bring this to an end. I know there are a lot of stuff to talk about, but we have set 3 hours for this webinar. So, but what we are going to do, we are going to prepare these interventions and put them in a written form, and we'll share this with our participants. Then you can always, continue contributing on the text that you receive. Now, I would like to call on to Dr. Mustafa Aydin to make the final remarks, sir. I'm terribly sorry. Sayın Başkanım, lütfen
Professor Aybar, thank you very much. But now I studied for the ekran. Also, some participants try to also talk. It is a very fruitful conference meeting. First of all, thank you very much, all the speakers and the participants. It is a very, very important and a fruitful meeting. And especially thank you, Professor Aybar, because he and also EURAS Secretariat, they are try to for this meeting. Thank you very much. Also, for example, the beginning is 2 o'clock, now approximately 6 o'clock. Yeah, 5:30, 3 hours and half hours. It is wonderful, wonderful. And I want to Professor Aybar, bütün konuşmacılar adına, how can I say the konuşmacılar adına?
On behalf of all.
Yeah, on behalf of all the participants and speakers, I want to you, Professor Aybar, joins all the speaker, all the idea, and the publishing as a book. And after that, I want to you send these books to us, also the participants. And I want to continue this webinar, not only for this. Thank you very much also all the participants, all the speakers. Thank you a lot of as the President EURAS and the Istanbul Aydın University. Thank you very much again, Professor Aybar. I am very happy, and from all the countries, speakers from the Africa, from the Asia, from the Balkans, and the Europe and Turkey also. Thank you very much again.
Dr. Aydın, we have already got one offer from UNIMED that they want to do similar thing with us in September.
Inshallah. Inshallah. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
If we continue this, so we get something. I'm very, very happy with the interventions and with contributions. I also would like to thank Dr. Aydin for supporting us as a person of education. Very, very important for our country. His contribution is a lot, and his knowledge and experience is a lot. And my colleagues, my friends from all around the world for joining in. I think we had more than 20 countries joining in. So thank you very much to all of you. And we have to bring this to an end, unfortunately.